My husband Bob and I are in our second year of marriage. While I may not excel in many areas, cooking is my forte. Your cooking is really delicious, Bob once said. That compliment, given on the lunch I prepared for our first date, was what made me fall for him. After 6 months of dating, we got married, and I left my job to become a full-time housewife. About a year ago, my father-in-law passed away, leaving just my mother-in-law, Bob, and me living together. I had hoped we could experience some time alone as newlyweds, even briefly, but when Bob said, "Mom's been feeling vulnerable since Dad passed away," I couldn't refuse. Shortly after starting our married life, I realized my mother-in-law didn't like me. I had encountered bullies at my old job, but she was worse. She constantly found fault with everything I did. While I was cleaning, she would point out every tiny spot I missed and say, "What's this brown spot? Can't you see it?" Once, she forced me to try to remove an unremovable stain from the floor, making me scrub it repeatedly. I wasn't allowed to stop until Bob came home from work. She would wake me up in the middle of the night and demand, "We're almost out of plastic wrap. Go and buy some now. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep just thinking about it." Since the grocery store was closed, I had to run to the nearest convenience store. If I tried to wake Bob, she would explode in anger, saying, "How dare you wake your tired husband? House chores are the wife's job." To avoid her wrath, I had no choice but to obey. These midnight errands were physically exhausting, but having my belongings thrown away or hidden was even more mentally draining. "I don't know where your stuff is. Maybe you left it somewhere," she would say whenever I couldn't find my things. It's awful to blame others for your own mistakes. I can never forget how shocked I was when I found my favorite cardigan in the trash can a few days later. When I told Bob what happened, he just sighed heavily. "Well, you can just buy a new one," he said. I also tried in vain to persuade him to talk to her. Not knowing what else to do, I bought a safe with the money I'd saved before marrying Bob. I kept my belongings out of her sight, especially my valuables, which I stored in the safe. It's crazy to distrust your own family like you do. I'd like to see the face of the person who raised you. Her harsh tone intensified, and every time she opened her mouth, I had to brace myself for the inevitable verbal attack. She criticized every meal I cooked, saying, "Too bland," or "No taste at all." When I tried to make the dishes more flavorful, she complained they were too spicy. I began to doubt my cooking skills and couldn't help asking my husband for his opinion on the taste. "Mom has very strong food preferences. I think it's delicious," he said. Cooking, once a joy, became a chore. After a year of enduring my mother-in-law's bullying, I had an epiphany. Staying home all the time was the problem. Realizing this, I decided to start working part-time. I had quit my job to be a housewife as Bob requested when we got married, but if staying at home was this painful, I wouldn't have left it so easily. Despite a slight gap in my career, I was valued for my quick learning skills at my part-time job, and it simply felt good to be praised again. However, as I spent less time at home, my mother-in-law began to focus her harassment during breakfast and dinner times. She used to eat despite her complaints, but started leaving most of the food untouched, barely taking a bite before leaving the table. I lost count of the times she accidentally knocked over her soup bowl. When I swallowed my pride and asked her what was wrong with the meal, she'd laugh and say, "You think asking will solve everything, don't you? Why don't you try thinking for yourself?" I was left alone to clean up her leftovers at the dinner table. One day, my mother-in-law really crossed the line. While we were having dinner, she suddenly stood up, took her plate in her hand, and headed to the kitchen. As I looked up in surprise, our eyes met, and she smirked. "What?" By the time I realized what was happening, she had already thrown the meal I made into the trash can. "This is such an awful-looking meal. Even dog food would look better than this," she scoffed. I looked at Bob in disbelief, but he just ignored me and continued eating. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, so I rushed to the trash can. I opened its lid and stared at the ruined food. "This is terrible." I turned around to see Bob, but he wouldn't even look at me. She probably wasn't feeling well. He dismissed his mother's actions. How could she throw the food away right in front of the person who made it? I asked, growing more upset. Bob scratched his head in annoyance and said, "Look, I have work tomorrow. Unlike you with your part-time job, I'm a full-time employee working hard from morning to night. What's wrong with doing a part-time job? I work, cook at home, and then have my cooking thrown away by your mother." My voice broke with emotion, and he sighed deeply. "Lisa, you're becoming a nag. Mom's probably irritated by your nagging too. you know. And if it's that bad, then you shouldn't be cooking anymore. After saying that, Bob walked into his bedroom, leaving me staring at his back in disbelief. At that moment, I finally realized he didn't care about me at all. Something inside of me just snapped. The next day, I prepared breakfast as usual and let both Bob and my mother-in-law know it was ready. Bob sat down to eat, but my mother-in-law grabbed her plate and said, "Not even a dog would eat this in the morning," then threw her breakfast in the trash can. Without a word, I stood up and took away the breakfast I prepared for Bob. "What?" he said, looking bewildered. "I will have it." I quickly sat down and started eating his breakfast, ignoring my mother-in-law's actions and Bob's growing frustration. "Hey, why are you eating my breakfast? What are you doing?" they both exclaimed. I looked at them innocently and replied, "Well, since your mother said a dog wouldn't even eat this, you shouldn't be eating it either. I'll take responsibility for what I made and eat it myself." "No, I didn't say that. But you didn't deny what your mother said, did you?" Bob opened his mouth but seemed unable to find anything to say. "Lisa, stop talking nonsense and make Bob's breakfast," my mother-in-law snapped. I looked straight at her with a smile. "I'm very sorry that I have been serving you the sort of food that a dog wouldn't even eat. Don't worry, I won't cook for you ever again." I grabbed my knife and fork, finished eating breakfast, and stood up. Bob said, "Wait, Lisa, what about my breakfast?" "Eat whatever you like," I replied, then left the house quickly. I usually return home around 5 p.m., but that day I had a few errands to run after work, so by the time I got home it was already past 8 p.m. "Oh, you're very late. We've been waiting for you. Really, where on earth have you been?" Bob and my mother-in-law complained, looking very hungry. "Oh, haven't you two eaten yet? I already had my dinner." My mother-in-law's face turned red with surprise and anger. "How dare you eat alone?" "Well, I did say I wouldn't cook for you anymore. Or were you looking forward to my terrible cooking?" "How dare you talk back to me like that?" she shouted, slamming the table in frustration. But then she quickly regained her composure and came up with what she thought was a brilliant idea. "If you're not cooking, then return the food money. Bob has been paying for all the living expenses, so you should pay him back every penny you spend on your food." I couldn't help but laugh at her confident declaration. "What's so funny?" she demanded. "Since I started working part-time, I've been paying not just for food but all living expenses." It was Bob's suggestion. I turned to him. "Mom isn't happy about your working, but if you pay the living expenses, it might calm her down," he had said to me. It had been over a year since I started my part-time job, which means I had been covering the living expenses for the last half of our married life. My mother-in-law, apparently unaware of this, looked shocked and turned to Bob. "Is that true, Bob?" "Well, you wanted more pocket money," Bob mumbled weakly, making excuses. He had me cover the living expenses so he could use the extra money for his mother's allowance. "You seem to have been spending quite a lot on extravagant meals." In the mailbox, I found a flyer for regular customers at an upscale restaurant. I had thought my mother-in-law made her own lunch, but after seeing the flyer, I had my suspicions and found some receipts from that restaurant in the trash. Shouldn't the proper thing be to pay back all the living expenses I've provided? After all, it was my hard-earned money. "Don't worry, I'll be sure to bill you properly," I said with a bright smile to my mother-in-law, who was trembling with anger. "Hey, what do you mean by billing?" Bob, perhaps sensing something, turned pale and stood up. "I want a divorce, and of course, I'll make sure I ask for alimony." "Divorce?" he muttered in shock, but then brightened up, thinking he found a flaw in my plan. "Do you think you can afford to live on your own with what you earn from your part-time job?" He probably thought I would struggle financially. "About that part-time job, I've been offered a full-time position." "What?" "I've also decided where I'll live." My actual plan was to commute from my parents' home for a while, I said, watching the realization dawn on him. "I'll get my lawyer to handle the proceedings from now on." With those words, I went to my bedroom and grabbed the luggage I had packed the night before. Bob, still in shock, stood frozen by the dining table. I ignored him and walked past. "Lisa, I'm sorry," he called out, making me stop and turn around. "Sorry for what? What do you mean?" I asked, exasperated. "It was hard to take sides between you and Mom." "I never said anything bad about your cooking, did I?" he replied. He doesn't understand anything at all. In the end, I truly realized I had been blind. It's not about taking sides. You chose to say nothing when the food was being thrown away and when I was being harassed by your mother over and over. Despite my pleas, you never helped me. Your playing the victim doesn't change the fact that you hurt me. I reproved him. Bob started crying bitterly. Seeing the gravity of his sorrow, I quickly glanced at the pathetic man and headed toward the front door. As I reached for the door, my mother-in-law called out to stop me. I never intended for things to get this bad. I was amazed at how oblivious she was to the severity of her actions. I've looked after you all this time, and it's disappointing that the last thing I hear from you is such an excuse-like response. From now on, you won't have to worry about being caught for spending a lot of money on delicious meals. My mother-in-law stood frozen, her eyes wide open as if her breath had stopped. I returned to my parents' house, where they warmly welcomed me, already aware of my situation. According to my lawyer, everyone in the neighborhood knew my mother-in-law was incapable of household chores. Apparently, my father-in-law had managed the housework when he was still alive. After his passing, Bob, now my ex-husband, and his mother lived on takeout and eating out. To them, I was a convenient housekeeper to exploit. The news about our divorce quickly spread throughout the town. Eventually, it reached Bob's bosses and colleagues, causing him considerable embarrassment. Bob and his mother are now in financial trouble, having hardly saved any money and squandering it all. They are panicking over the alimony they owe me. Now that everybody knows about their mistreatment of me, finding a new housekeeper has become impossible. They can't even afford the kind of meals they used to have. Bob, unrelenting, kept texting and asking if we could get back together. I also received messages from my mother-in-law filled with excuses, but they were repetitive and uninteresting, so I stopped reading them. Now, I enjoy cooking for my family, making sweets and baking cakes on weekends. I often share my creations with my colleagues. Surrounded by those who appreciate my cooking, I believe this will help restore my confidence. With this new hope, my heart swells with anticipation.
Upon glancing at my phone, I noticed a staggering 13 missed calls, all originating from my persistent mother-in-law, Martha. Not again, I thought to myself. Just as I was contemplating this influx of calls, my phone vibrated once more. Answering the call, I was met with Martha's angered voice demanding, "Excuse me, isn't the allowance for this month $3,000 due?" "Excuse me?" I responded, trying to keep my composure. "Send the allowance. This month's payment hasn't been deposited yet." Martha raged on, completely indifferent to my circumstances and solely fixated on her own desires. Fed up with her lack of consideration, even in challenging situations, I reluctantly resorted to my last option. Pulling myself together, I blurted out, "Your son has passed away, so I can no longer send the allowance. My name is Jennifer Smith, 32 years old. I'm a busy working woman at a major financial firm and also a housewife." Reflecting on my past, I reminisced about meeting my beloved husband Mark 2 years ago. We connected through our shared hobbies, and our relationship blossomed quickly. Despite encountering no major quarrels, a significant issue arose in the form of Martha, my mother-in-law. Mark's father had passed away a few years ago, leaving Martha as his sole family. The trouble began when I visited Martha's home to introduce myself before our wedding. Martha greeted me with a displeased expression, remarking, "So, you're Mark's fiancé, huh?" "Yes, my name is Jennifer Miller." To my astonishment, she continued, "You're a rather plain girl. I wonder what Mark sees in you." Uncertain if she was joking or being serious, I was left in shock. Mark, noticing my discomfort, confronted his mother. "Hey, Mom, what's with the sudden harsh words? How can you say such things to the person I chose?" Martha responded, "I'm just trying to choose a suitable woman for you." An argument unfolded between mother and son, leaving the air heavy with tension during my first meeting with Martha. I found myself unable to intervene, even though the atmosphere remained awkward. Eventually, we managed to convey our intention to marry. As we were leaving, Martha called out to Mark, sounding somewhat disgruntled. "Mark, can I have a word? You're going to keep that promise after you get married, right?" "What promise?" Mark inquired. "You know, about the allowance." "Ah, that. Yes, I'll be sure to take care of that." "Can we not discuss it here, please?" Mark replied. While leaving, the tension between my husband and his mother lingered, and the air was thick with discomfort. In the car on the way home, I brought up the conversation Mark had with his mom. Hey, Mark, about the conversation you had with your mom as we were leaving. Yeah, I should have told you about it, Jennifer. I heard something about an allowance. After my dad passed away, I've been sending money to my mom every month. How much? I asked. $2,000. $2,000. I couldn't help but raise my voice in surprise. Mark sighed deeply and explained. Actually, my mom has a debt from a casino a long time ago. She's still paying it off, and because her health isn't great these days, she spends a lot of time at home. But she still needs money to live on, right? But $2,000? Isn't that a bit too much? If I try to lower the amount, she keeps calling me over and over. And no matter what, a mother is still a mother. I worry about her living alone, Mark reasoned. I understood that Mark was genuinely devoted to his mother. Since his father passed away, Martha had been the only family he had left. Regardless of her character, she was still his beloved mother. 2 months after our wedding, during my lunch break, I received a call from Martha on my smartphone. When I answered, she began to speak in a cheerful tone. Jennifer, long time no see. Can we chat for a bit? Yes. What can I do for you? I asked. Well, I was hoping you could start sending me money, Martha said. I was taken aback and struggled to find words. However, Martha seemed excited to continue the conversation. You mentioned before that you're working for a financial company, right? That means you have a good salary, doesn't it? Not exactly. What, are you lying to avoid giving me money? That's not what I mean, I replied. Then what is it? But Martha, you're still receiving financial support from Mark, aren't you? I asked. In defiance, Martha responded, So what? Jennifer sternly stated what she felt Martha was not appreciating. Martha, receiving $2,000 in monthly support is a big deal, and yet you're asking for more. Really? You think so? If you were to send me an additional $1,000, I could avoid burdening Mark. What do you mean by that? I asked. Well, I have Mark as a guarantor for my debts. If I fail to make payments, the debt collectors will go after him. Do you understand? Martha explained. But aren't you using part of Mark's $2,000 to pay back the debt? I inquired. I'm short. I haven't told Mark, but I have a significant amount of debt, Martha confessed. From her tone, it was apparent that this was a fact even her husband was unaware of. Having children in the future would increase our expenses. In addition to that, taking over Martha's debt was not an easy task. However, if Martha's payments fall behind and the debt falls onto Mark, the interest will likely have accumulated significantly by that time. If I refuse to send money, it would eventually become a problem for my husband as well. Thinking along those lines, I reluctantly agreed to Martha's proposal. All right, I'll start sending you money. Really? Good, Jennifer. I knew you would say that. The total, with Mark's contribution, will be $3,000. But this means you can pay off your debt, right? Yes, of course. I should be able to pay it all off in about a year. You promise, right? You'll make sure to pay off all your debts. I get it. So I'll be expecting it from this month onwards. Martha concluded the call abruptly. Physical exhaustion from work combined with this emotional burden only added to my stress. $1,000 a month, that's going to be rough. But it's also to prevent future problems for us. After all, if Martha can't make a living, it will upset Mark as well. That night, I promptly reported the matter to my husband. He told me I didn't have to do this, but I had already given my word to Martha, and it was a decision made for our future well-being. Mark expressed his gratitude and understanding, even as he maintained a sorry expression throughout. Time flew by, and 2 years have passed since then. The financial aid we thought would end in a year is still ongoing, and even now, we are transferring $3,000 every month to Martha. What's more, about 2 months ago, Mark fell ill and has been unable to go to work. He's on sick leave, so he's receiving disability benefits, but it's a mere pittance compared to his previous salary. Last month, I managed to transfer $3,000 to Martha from my savings, but it would be very challenging if this situation continues. Unbelievably, Martha has not once come to visit her sick son. We have informed her of his hospitalization, but she doesn't show up to see him and only contacts me to ask, "You're still sending the money, right?" I was so furious that I decided to address the issue with Mark. "Mark, listen. Don't you think it's wrong that Martha is only concerned about money, even though you're in such a state? We need to think seriously about what to do going forward." "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. I don't want to put more strain on you, Jennifer. This month, too, she's been bombarding me with calls and messages, asking if we've sent the money yet. Are you serious? How can she only think about money when her own son is sick?" Mark expressed his anger towards his mother, his face slightly worn. Then, as if he had an idea, Mark exclaimed, "That's it," and wore a sly grin. "What is it, Mark?" "Well, this is our last resort. I've come up with something good. For your mom." "What?" I was curious but cautious. Mark suggested a plan that I could never have imagined. Although it could be called inappropriate, it seemed to be the only way to make Martha understand. A few weeks later, Mark was discharged from the hospital. Martha didn't reply to any of our messages, so we didn't inform her about Mark's discharge. In the last 2 weeks, Martha had been relentlessly demanding money, displaying no concern for her son's well-being. While Mark and I were enjoying a cup of tea, a message came in on my phone. Upon checking, I found 13 missed calls from Martha again. As I thought, my phone vibrated again. It was another call from Martha. "Hello," I answered and turned on the speaker microphone so that Mark could hear. Martha started shouting right away. "Listen, where's the $3,000 for this month?" "Excuse me, that's right. The money for this month hasn't been transferred yet," I replied. "Do you realize Mark is now? I don't care if he's in the hospital or whatever. It's none of my business. You're working at a good place, right? You must have plenty of savings. Hurry up and transfer it here," Martha shouted angrily. Eventually, she said something unbelievable. "Listen, since you married Mark, if you can't pay, you have to pay me. Understand? If you refuse, I'll make you the guarantor. Got it?" At that moment, something inside me snapped. She was displaying her desires openly without considering our situation at all. I had reached my breaking point with her. She didn't even try to reflect on her own actions. Now, I had no choice but to resort to the last resort. I firmly declared into my smartphone, "Mark has passed away. I can't send you any more money." At these words, Martha blurted out in bafflement, "What?" Yes, this was the last resort that my husband suggested. Lie to Martha about Mark's death and observe her reaction. If she showed any sign of sadness, if she reflected on her behavior and apologized, we would continue to support her financially. But if she didn't reflect, if she demanded money, we would sever ties completely. Deep down, I knew it was time to confront Martha's blatant disregard for the well-being of her own family. I believed that even someone as money-driven as Martha would deeply reflect on her actions upon hearing that her own son had passed away. However, the very next moment, Martha burst into loud laughter. "What's so funny?" I questioned. "Well, isn't it obvious? If Mark is dead, that means his inheritance will be distributed to me too. Excuse me, I've been looking into it since I heard that Mark was sick. Listen here, 2/3 of Mark's assets are yours, but 1/3 is mine." I was at a loss for words. I never anticipated that when she first heard her son was sick, she wouldn't look into treatment, but into how the inheritance would be divided. My anger surpassed. I was simply dumbfounded. My husband seemed to feel the same way, and as our eyes met, he slowly nodded. This was the signal to continue with the plan. Once again, I said to Martha in a strong tone, "Martha, did you hear what I said? Mark is dead." I heard, "What about it? Aren't you sad your own son passed away before you?" Martha replied nonchalantly, "You just make sure to send me some. I won't let you get away with not doing it." With a click, the phone line was cut off, and a dial tone echoed. I glanced at my husband and saw that he was shaking, his face red with anger. "Mark, are you okay?" I asked. My husband looked into my eyes and said, "I'm cutting ties with her. She'll likely come here eventually, demanding money. Let's wait until then, okay?" "But are you really okay with this? Cutting off ties just like that?" "Yeah, I have no regrets. After that call, she's no mother." My husband's eyes were filled with hatred, and I felt the same way. A person who only thinks about money over her own son's life is not family to me. A few days later, as expected, Martha came to our house. For the time being, I decided to hide my husband in the next room and deal with Martha myself. Martha approached me with a face like a demon. "Hey, give me Mark's inheritance right now." Again with that? Anything else to say? He's already dead, isn't he? It's pointless to say anything now. Yet you never even visited him. What are you saying? Are you really his mother? You're so annoying. Give me the inheritance right away. I don't mind getting the lawyer. Speaking more would be a waste of time. Just as I thought that, my husband emerged from the next room. Seeing him, Martha let out a startled gasp as if she had seen a ghost. "Mark, why weren't you dead?" "Long time no see, Mom." "Sorry, but the news about my death was a lie." "A lie? How could you be so disrespectful?" "I wanted to confirm your true nature, Mom. I was curious about how you'd handle the allowance if your son died. But you turned out to be a gold digger, just as I suspected." I understood perfectly. "What? How dare you call your mother a gold digger?" "Silence. I'm cutting ties with a toxic parent like you." My husband's angry shouts left Martha with her mouth agape. She couldn't come to terms with the fact that her own son was severing ties with her. "What does this mean, Mark?" she stammered. "It means exactly what I said. I can't consider someone like you as my mother. No way." "What about the allowance?" "Do you really think I would? You're on your own with the debts. We're moving. Wait, please. If you do that, what about my living expenses?" Teary-eyed and pleading, Martha reached out to my husband. He forcefully shook off her hand, looked at her coldly, and said, "I don't care about your living expenses. You have been living off us without even a single apology. I really understand your despicable nature now. Don't you dare show up in front of us again." "No, wait, Mark. Are you going to abandon your mother?" Ignoring her words, my husband grabbed Martha's arm and dragged her to the front door. He threw her shoes and bag outside and chased Martha out of the house. Martha made a fuss outside for a while but disappeared after a bit, perhaps unable to withstand the eyes of the neighbors. She tried contacting us multiple times, but we ignored all of her attempts. We set Martha's number to be automatically rejected, and we finished moving. Regarding the matter of co-signing for the debts, it became invalid since Martha had made Mark the co-signer without his consent, and therefore he was not responsible. Without the allowance from us, Martha seemed to be leading a miserable life. It's only natural, considering she had been using the allowance for her gambling habits instead of paying off her debts. She still had a mountain of debts and was chased by debt collectors every day. Unable to gamble anymore, she seems to be working from dawn to dusk. For the foreseeable future, it's unlikely that she will be able to pay off her debts completely. She will have to keep working until she is unable to move. This is entirely her own doing. As for us, we are spending fulfilling days in our new home. My husband's condition has stabilized, and he has returned to work. After some time, there's a new life growing in my belly. We're going to have an additional member in our family next year. From now on, we want to spend happy days as a family of 3. I received a call informing me about a falling accident involving my husband, Mike. Panicked, I rushed to the hospital, where the doctor conveyed that the surgery was successful, but Mike hadn't regained consciousness. The uncertainty of when or if he would wake up weighed heavily on me, and I collapsed in despair. The next day, my nephew Tyler, whom I hadn't seen in years, visited the hospital room. He handed me a letter that Mike had left with him a while back, insisting I read it alone. As I read the letter, I discovered an astonishing confession from Mike. To confirm its authenticity, I examined an unconscious Mike and found evidence supporting the letter's contents. Unbeknownst to me, Mike's secret was exposed, leading to unforeseen developments. Mike and I had married early, supported by our strong connection. As I began to enjoy my work, I expressed my desire to continue working after marriage, and we mutually agreed to support each other. Over the years, our bond remained close. Before turning 30, we both desired children, actively trying to conceive. The sudden passing of Mike's voluntarily institutionalized father, whom we had regularly visited, shocked us. Struggling with the loss, we could barely eat. Mike regretted not insisting on living together, and we wanted to repay the debt owed to his father for the support we received in the early years of our marriage. However, a complicated family dynamic unfolded after Mike's mother-in-law's death. Mike's older sister, whom we had hardly met, was more concerned about the inheritance than her grieving father and us. She demanded her share before the funeral, and to pacify her, Mike's father gave her severance money under the condition that she never contact him again. Mike and I were not informed about the sale of his parents' house, making it likely his sister didn't know about it either. Concerned about potential future troubles, we decided to contact her and distribute the assets equally to prevent disputes. The challenge, though, was the absence of a clear will from Mike's father-in-law, who had intended to meet with a lawyer before his sudden demise. Mike called his sister to inform her about their father's death and the funeral arrangements, but the conversation turned sour when she demanded her share of the inheritance without expressing any condolences. Frustrated but trying to remain calm, Mike discussed the inheritance distribution, learning about his sister's recent divorce. He was particularly concerned about his nephew, her son, but the conversation was dominated by the contentious inheritance issue. After the call, Mike was visibly upset and worried about potential disruptions at the funeral, reminiscent of his mother-in-law's funeral. I consented to remain silent as Mike wished. The days following the funeral were consumed by various procedures, and during this time, his sister called almost daily regarding the inheritance. Initially, Mike patiently explained, but gradually he started to ignore her calls, growing tired of the constant disruptions. Eventually, he decided to meet her, and surprisingly, she became quite cheerful about the situation. Feeling uneasy, I wanted to accompany him, but he insisted on facing her alone. For the past 2 years, I have been involved in handling all the arrangements after the deaths of Mike's parents. Mike, however, believed it wouldn't be right to further involve me in dealing with his sister and the inheritance distribution. He assured me he could handle it and requested that I not worry. Trusting his judgment, I decided to wait and observe how things would unfold. Initially planning to join him, a sudden increase in work at my company made it impossible to match his schedule, and Mike ended up meeting her alone as planned. On the day of the meeting, my work was incredibly busy, and during my break, I couldn't help but worry about Mike. Trying to focus on work, I believed that no news was good news. Suddenly, my phone rang, displaying an unknown number with the hospital's name. Though hesitant, I answered, and the nurse confirmed the hospital's name. Learning about Mike's urgent situation, I left work immediately. Upon arriving, I discovered Mike undergoing emergency surgery. The nurse explained his critical condition and sought my consent for the procedure. Overwhelmed, I signed various documents, and the nurse sternly but kindly reminded me to pull myself together, emphasizing that Mike was fighting for his life. Throughout the night, I arranged for Mike's hospital stay and contacted various people. It wasn't until late at night that I could sit beside him, relieved that he was alive. Tears naturally flowed, but I held his hand tightly, hoping for his consciousness to return. However, he remained unresponsive. Around noon the next day, Mike's sister unexpectedly appeared in the room. This was the first time I had seen her since my mother-in-law's funeral. Wondering why she was there, I inquired about how she knew about this hospital. It seemed peculiar as I had not stepped out of Mike's room, making it impossible for her to spot me anywhere else. She assumed Mike was brain dead based on his unconscious state, displaying insensitivity. Despite her lack of concern for his safety or chances of recovery, She demanded compensation for her uninvited visit. To avoid causing a scene in front of Mike, I handed her money and watched her leave the room with an imposing attitude. As she left, she called her son into the room, introducing him as my nephew. Before leaving, she instructed him to look after me. The boy, hesitant at first, approached me and handed me a letter from Mike, stating that it was given without his mother's knowledge. The torn piece of paper seemed to contain an important message from Mike. I quickly perused the letter, discovering that Mike and his sister were initially scheduled to meet at a cafe. However, on the day of their meeting, she unexpectedly called him to her house. Mike, sensing something amiss, decided to document the events while remaining vigilant. The letter revealed a mysterious injury around the time of his mother's death, an incident he had treated himself without my knowledge. As I delved further into the letter, an astonishing story unfolded. During disputes over his mother's inheritance, Mike experienced an odd sensation in his leg after walking through a crowd. To his shock, he found a deep cut on his thigh and a utility knife in his pocket, its blade hidden. His sister now claimed responsibility for the injury, stating she had aimed for an artery in the crowd but failed. She even knew the exact location of the wound. Checking Mike's thigh while he was unconscious, I found the old cut, providing clear evidence of his sister's malicious intent. As anger surged within me, I redressed Mike, focusing on the letter. Mike expressed his conviction that his life was in danger, and he had written the letter hurriedly, while his sister briefly left the room during their inheritance discussion. Oddly, she insisted on having her son present during this discussion, planning to use him as bait in a tearful plea for a larger share of the inheritance. Feeling threatened, Mike had instructed his nephew to give me the letter if anything happened to him. The letter also mentioned evidence in the inner pocket of his jacket. Searching the jacket untouched since the nurse handed it to me, I found a voice recorder. The bloodstains indicated the severity of the accident, and Mike had shielded the recorder to protect the evidence at the risk of his own life. Listening to the shocking contents, I realized it was evidence that could incriminate his sister. In a state of disbelief, I immediately contacted the police. Shortly after, Mike's sister returned cheerfully, claiming satisfaction and demanding the chair I was using. As she casually touched up her makeup, I asked about the outcome of the inheritance distribution. She lied, stating Mike had agreed to give her a larger share. When questioned about the accident, she claimed ignorance. Choosing not to confront her lies immediately, I asked other questions about memories with Mike, their father, her divorce, and her current living situation. Inquiring about the restaurant meeting and subsequent events captured on the voice recorder, she soon became irritated, dismissing my involvement, declaring, "He was my father. You're just an outsider who married into the family." Despite my indirect connection to the inheritance, Mike's life-threatening accident implicated me in a profound way. I implored her to speak the truth, but she responded with visible outrage, asking if I thought she was lying. In response, I played the voice recorder that Mike had risked his life to save. The recording began with Mike expressing concerns about the difficulty of their conversation and his intention to record it as evidence. His sister immediately pressured him for a larger share of their father's inheritance. Initially reserved, she claimed she needed help raising her nephew alone. However, when Mike rejected her suggestion and demanded she ask her ex-husband for child support, her demeanor dramatically shifted. She confessed to inflicting the cut on Mike's thigh during the dispute over their mother's inheritance, admitting she thought it would increase her share. Mike cleverly changed the topic and suggested moving to a public place, inviting her to a nearby fish restaurant. However, her demeanor changed again, and she left to get ready. In that moment, Mike quickly wrote a letter to me, entrusting it to his nephew, and mentioned the voice recorder, hoping I would find it. After leaving her house for a restaurant, Mike treated his sister to lunch. Upon leaving, he suggested consulting a lawyer due to the deadlock in their discussion. When Mike said he was heading home, his sister insisted on accompanying him to the station. During their walk, she tried to dissuade him from involving a lawyer, leading to a commotion and voices calling for an ambulance. The recording stopped, possibly because of the emergency treatment. The sister-in-law initially seemed shocked, then became defiant, dismissing it as a sibling argument unrelated to the inheritance dispute. However, I pointed out that it proved Mike's fall was not an accident, but an incident. The police, who had arrived during her absence, confirmed the contents of the voice recorder. The sister-in-law gasped in disbelief, realizing she couldn't escape accountability. Plainclothes detectives, posing as visitors, blocked the entrance, leaving no easy escape route. As the reality of her actions dawned on her, her arrogant demeanor shifted to fear. The police took her away, dismissing her attempts to deflect responsibility with nonchalant responses. I handed over the voice recorder to the lead investigator. After the sister-in-law's drama subsided, another person appeared, Mike's former brother-in-law. I had called him when contacting the police, and as the nephew saw his father, he exclaimed, "Daddy," leaping into his arms. The former brother-in-law acknowledged me with a nod, embracing his son. This was the first time I had met him since my mother-in-law's funeral. The voice recorder contained the sister-in-law's true feelings about her son, stating she never wanted a child and only gave birth out of obligation. Child care was mostly left to the former brother-in-law, and his parents had often helped. After their divorce, the former brother-in-law assumed he would easily obtain custody of their son. However, driven by a desire for child support, the sister-in-law convincingly portrayed herself as a devoted mother in one custody. Despite having never mistreated their son, her actions were revealed to be routine cruelty, such as depriving him of food and locking him in a closet. Mike's letter disclosed his determination to rescue his nephew from this situation, even at the cost of relinquishing his entire inheritance. Mike believed that offering the entire inheritance would prompt his sister-in-law, motivated by greed, to give up custody of her nephew. This decision was not only about the inheritance, but also about the welfare of his nephew. Realizing the gravity of the situation, I felt compelled to join in the determination to hold the sister-in-law accountable for her actions. The former brother-in-law, witnessing the drastic change in his son, blamed himself for the past. Despite securing a monthly visitation agreement, the sister-in-law consistently denied him access to their son, threatening to cut ties if he persisted. Regretful for not confronting her sooner, the former brother-in-law apologized to his son repeatedly. Determined to rectify the situation, he vowed to confront his sister. The sister-in-law had already been reported not only for the suspicious circumstances surrounding Mike's fall, but also for her mistreatment of the children. The youth division arrived, expressing a desire to hear from the nephew. As a guardian, my presence was required, and I accompanied them to the police station. Mike's recovery was uncertain, but the urgency of the nephew's situation took precedence. At the police station, a confrontation ensued between the former brother-in-law and the sister-in-law. In a moment of distress, she made outrageous accusations, labeling her son as a child of a demon. The police, unswayed by her claims, detained her. With the sister-in-law in custody, the focus shifted to the nephew's custody. Based on recorded statements and the nephew's account, it was decided he should stay with the former brother-in-law. Overjoyed to live with his father, the nephew was now ensured a comfortable life. After the police interrogation, I returned to the hospital, resolved to stay by Mike's side. The next morning, Mike regained consciousness. Following his request, we got the detective to come over, and Mike revealed that he was pushed from behind by his sister. Forensics confirmed her handprints on the jacket he was wearing at the time. Confronted with undeniable evidence, the sister-in-law was arrested. Mike demanded compensation and medical expenses from her, but her financial situation was dire. Eventually, Mike proposed splitting his father's inheritance equally, ensuring compensation and medical expenses. The sister-in-law's money dwindled as she repeatedly fired lawyers, leading to a bleak trial. The nephew's emaciated body recovered, and custody was successfully secured by the former brother-in-law. They are now living peacefully with my ex-father-in-law and his parents. After Mike's discharge, I started feeling unwell, and a checkup revealed we were expecting a new life. We hope to raise our child to always smile and be kind, believing that our happiness is just beginning. Now that the elderly patriarch has passed away, I find myself in the role of the eldest son, essentially the decision maker for the family. Allow me to make it clear, the entirety of the inheritance belongs to us. Mom and Nolan will receive nothing. Prepare yourselves for this, and I apologize for the inconvenience, but Ryan would likely prefer it this way. It's more fitting for Aaron, who consistently prioritized Ryan's well-being, to inherit everything, rather than it going to the useless Olivia and Nolan. Despite Ryan's declining health, Aaron and his wife, Grace, never bothered to visit him, despite numerous invitations. After the funeral, their sudden appearance shocked everyone as they made audacious claims about taking the entire inheritance. Nolan, the second son, was visibly upset, and rightfully so. We had always strived to do what was best for Ryan, and Aaron and Grace's unbelievable behavior was intolerable. While pondering this, Nolan finally spoke up, expressing his displeasure. The words he uttered turned Aaron and Grace pale. I am Olivia, a 71-year-old housewife, living with my husband and Nolan. Ryan, as the second son of a major corporation-owning family, did not take over as CEO, but still had substantial assets. Despite his wealth, Ryan was frugal, detesting wastefulness and encouraging savings. However, Aaron and Grace, who were extravagant and often spent recklessly, faced financial trouble and sought our help regularly. On one occasion, Aaron and Grace approached our home together. Nolan, avoiding them, had gone out. Ignoring our disapproval, Aaron addressed Ryan, saying, "Dad, we're struggling with our finances this month. Could you help us out a bit?" Ryan, frustrated with their reckless spending, frowned. Grace chimed in, attempting to persuade Ryan, "You know, we have Colton too. He's about to enter high school and wants to go to a prestigious private school. But private schools are expensive, right? Colton's your beloved grandson. Maybe you could help a little." Their audacious request, despite needing help, astounded us. However, due to Ryan's deep affection for Colton, he agreed to provide financial assistance, setting strict conditions to prevent wasteful spending and ensuring Colton wouldn't suffer. Aaron and Grace, aware of Ryan's soft spot for Colton, exploited it, using him as a reason to secure the financial support they sought. The same pattern repeated itself, with us reluctantly agreeing to give them money following Ryan's instructions. I transferred a reasonable sum to Aaron and Grace's account, hoping for a positive change in our lives. However, our efforts seemed futile. More misfortune struck when Ryan collapsed, prompting Nolan to call an ambulance. Ryan was diagnosed with advanced cancer, and the treatment offered no guarantees. Devastated by this news, we resolved to support Ryan until the end. I visited the hospital daily, while Nolan, despite working, spent his days off by Ryan's bedside. Yet despite his deteriorating condition, Aaron and his family never visited. Ryan grew increasingly weary and longed to see Colton, whom he adored. Unable to bear seeing Ryan so lonely, I contacted Aaron and Grace, requesting them to visit with Colton. However, they responded dismissively, stating it was a hassle and never showed up. Ryan's battle with cancer lasted about a year, taking a heavy toll on him. After a long struggle, Ryan passed away, leaving an indescribable void. Nolan supported me, even though he must have been hurting too. Despite being overwhelmed with grief, I couldn't help with the funeral arrangements. Aaron and Grace never offered assistance, remaining heartless even in the face of Ryan's death. Ryan's funeral, a quiet affair attended by close family and friends, saw no sign of Aaron and Grace. After the funeral, as Nolan and I placed flowers and sympathy cards on the altar, the doorbell rang. We exchanged glances, realizing it was Aaron and his family. Colton's presence, after such a long absence, felt strange. Aaron casually mentioned they couldn't make it to the funeral due to a family trip they had planned. Grace and Colton followed him into the living room, their audacity astonishing us. Apologetic words seemed insincere, and their lack of empathy hurt deeply. I was even more taken aback when Aaron uttered something unbelievable. Now that the old man's gone, as the eldest, I'm pretty much in charge. Listen up, the entire inheritance is ours. Mom and Nolan get nothing, just so you know, he declared confidently. In disbelief, I blurted out, sorry about this, but Ryan would be happier this way. It's better for the inheritance to go to Aaron, who always considered Ryan first, than to useless Olivia and Nolan. Aaron and Grace's outrageous claims stunned me. After leaving everything to us and enjoying their easy life, they now showed up to claim Ryan's inheritance. I couldn't bear the thought of even a part of the inheritance ending up in Aaron and Grace's hands. While we were struggling with this dilemma, Nolan suddenly spoke up, flipping the situation. I've been thinking, Colton doesn't really look like Aaron, Nolan stated. Everyone, including Aaron's family and myself, was shocked by this statement. Now there's no time for this, Nolan. What are you saying? Colton is definitely Aaron's child. He just takes after me. Grace reacted strongly to Nolan's casual remark. Her face turned pale, as if a taboo subject had been broached. Why are you so flustered? I just mentioned it casually because I was curious. Also, Colton doesn't seem to resemble Grace either. Or is it just me? Nolan suggested. As we took a closer look at Colton's face, he didn't seem to resemble Nolan or Grace, especially since Grace claimed he looks like me, which didn't seem quite right. Aaron, apparently thinking the same, turned pale and glared at Grace. Are you accusing me of cheating? Could Colton not be my son? Aaron said, grabbing Grace by the collar. Grace frantically denied it, saying, no, that's not true. But her denial lacked credibility. The situation was escalating, and without intervention, it could spiral out of control. Eventually, Nolan stepped in, saying, calm down. It'll all be clear once we do the DNA test. We decided to conduct the test. Grace kept arguing, saying there's no need for that, and doubting our parental bond. Although Aaron complained about this, he seemed determined to take a DNA test with Colton in the near future, not swayed by Grace's words. For a few days, I had little contact with Aaron and Grace, mostly spending my time sorting through Ryan's belongings. Then, one day, the doorbell rang again. As Nolan and I wondered who it could be, Aaron entered the living room alone. It was unusual for him to visit our house by himself. I made coffee and offered him a seat. With a look of humiliation, Aaron placed a document on the table, the DNA test result. It stated that there was no paternal relationship between Colton and Aaron. In other words, Colton wasn't Aaron's child. I've been deceived by Grace. Colton must be the child of her lover. She betrayed me, Aaron exclaimed, his face turning red with anger. While cheating is undoubtedly wrong, Aaron may deserve some sympathy for being deceived. However, I couldn't find it in me to sympathize with Aaron. We hadn't forgotten Aaron's past unreasonable behavior, and Grace's betrayal didn't justify taking Aaron's side. I wouldn't be satisfied until I thoroughly confronted Grace. Please help me. Your oldest son was deceived, and you must be upset too. We need to unite as a family now. Aaron pleaded, taking her hands. Still, I couldn't bring myself to cooperate with Aaron, and my feelings were cooling even more. Seeing this, Nolan spoke up. Sorry, but I can't support you, Aaron. You betrayed Dad too. We haven't forgotten that Aaron was one of those who abandoned Ryan. If he had supported Ryan, then maybe his loneliness would have been lessened. Thinking of this, I couldn't easily forgive Aaron. That was a different time. I was trying to spend time with my family, but they're not our family anymore. Despite our reluctance, we agreed to call Grace. Since the decision to do the DNA test, Grace had been taking Colton out often, rarely coming home. Grace didn't show her face even when Aaron contacted her, so I decided to contact her using Ryan's inheritance as a pretext. I wouldn't normally do this, nor did I want to, but I did because I have a secret plan, Nolan said soon after. The doorbell rang, and it seemed Grace and Colton had arrived. As I opened the door to let them in, Grace frowned at Aaron's jacket hanging next to the door. You didn't tell me Aaron was here. Did you deceive me, Olivia? Grace exclaimed, about to leave with Colton. If they left now, calling them under the guise of discussing the inheritance would be pointless. Just as I was wondering how to keep them, Nolan stepped forward. Wait, Grace, calm down. If you leave now, things might get worse. It's better to talk here where we can control Aaron than alone. It's in your best interest. Certainly, if Grace and Aaron were to talk alone, the outcome could be unpredictable. Aaron might even become violent in his anger. In such cases, probably only Nolan could restrain him. Convinced by Nolan's reasoning, Grace and her family entered the house. As they passed through the living room door, Aaron glared at them. In response, Nolan, urging calmness, said, "Settle down," and then seated everyone and served coffee. Grace and her family looked visibly uncomfortable, but we managed to calm the situation. At that time, I didn't understand why Nolan had chosen such a complicated approach. Why did he need to gather us all here? Wouldn't talking to them individually have worked? But later, thanks to a trump card Nolan revealed, it all became clear. I understood why he had gathered us in that place. The room fell silent, with both Aaron and Grace seeming to gauge each other's reactions. Unable to bear the tension, Grace suddenly apologized, saying, "I'm so sorry. I never intended for this to happen. I was deceived too." Grace, in tears, recounted her story. Her affair had begun over a decade ago with a colleague from her workplace. At the time, she had already been in a relationship with him before meeting Aaron. However, her lover was married with children. Grace claimed they drifted apart, and that's when she met Aaron. Aaron fell for her at first sight and passionately confessed his feelings. Grace, whose feelings for her lover were fading, started dating Aaron and eventually married him. About a year later, Grace reconnected with her distant lover. She hadn't expected to meet him again as she had quit her job by then. Their rekindled romance led to Grace becoming enthralled once more, and that's when she became pregnant with Colton. However, around the same time, her lover moved away with his family, effectively abandoning Grace. She knew it was wrong not to tell Aaron that Colton wasn't his child, but she didn't have the confidence to raise a child alone. So Grace lied that Colton was Aaron's child and continued that lie. If he hadn't left, I would have been honest about the affair and that Colton wasn't Aaron's child. It's all his fault, Grace continued crying. Colton was silent, shocked by the revelation. That doesn't excuse what you did. You betrayed me. You destroyed my happiness, Aaron retorted. Grace's excuses seemed incoherent, and even Aaron couldn't accept such explanations. The argument escalated into a fight, with Aaron and Grace grabbing each other. As if to admonish Aaron and Grace, Nolan clapped his hands, saying, "If you want to fight, go ahead. But I have something important to say too." Nolan's words immediately stopped their quarrel. The mention of the inheritance they were fixated on seemed enough to calm their anger. Seemingly agreeing to a truce, the two sat down. Seeing them seated, Nolan smiled with satisfaction and pulled out an envelope from his pocket. "This is Dad's will. He had it written by a trustworthy lawyer during his time in the hospital. It clearly states how the inheritance is to be divided. I was unaware of the existence of a will. Probably Ryan had directly asked Nolan to arrange for a lawyer." Nolan opened the envelope and began to read the contents of the letter inside. What he read was astonishing. The inheritance would be divided, with half going to my wife Olivia and 1/4 each to my son Nolan and my grandson Colton. The atmosphere changed dramatically as Nolan read this line. Aaron turned pale, exclaiming, "That can't be right." He lunged at Nolan, snatching the will and reading it, his eyes widening to their limits. "How can this be? Why is there nothing for me?" As the eldest son, Aaron had always assumed with certainty that he would receive a larger share of the inheritance. Yet hearing that he wasn't allocated even a small part, Aaron couldn't possibly accept it. Disheartened, he slumped to the ground, repeatedly reading the will, hoping for a different outcome. However, the content remained unchanged. Taking the will from Aaron, I reread it to confirm. and it seemed there was no mistake in what Nolan had read. Naturally, Aaron, you and your wife had received substantial support from Dad. Dad was well aware that all the money was being used for your frivolities. That's why he decided not to leave anything for you. Nolan spoke calmly. Ryan's secret trump card had indeed managed to plunge Aaron into despair. By the way, I've already informed your parents, as per Dad's instructions, that the portion of the inheritance going to Colton will be temporarily held by your parents. So it's better not to think you can misuse Colton's inheritance, Nolan continued. Aaron was left questioning how this could be. It seemed that Nolan and Ryan had carefully acted to prevent selfish wastage. In that case, surely the portion allocated to Colton would be used for his future. Ryan had been concerned about Colton until the end. The two issues that surrounded us, Grace's infidelity and Ryan's inheritance, were finally resolved. We no longer needed to devote time to Aaron and Grace. After the discussion, Aaron's family returned home, looking dejected. The next steps were for them to discuss among themselves. As expected, Aaron and Grace ended up divorcing. We who had heard Grace's confession that day became undeniable witnesses, and Aaron demanded substantial compensation from Grace. Further disputes arose over the custody of Colton, as both wanted sole custody, knowing that Colton would eventually secure the inheritance. Myself, Nolan, and Grace's parents intervened in the negotiations. Eventually, it was decided that Colton would stay with Grace's parents until he came of age. Once the divorce was finalized, Aaron started visiting our house frequently, saying, "Let's live together." Feeling unable to accept him as family after all had transpired, we moved out, almost fleeing from Aaron. We changed our contact details, making it unlikely for Aaron to reach us. Grace, for her part, seems to be having a tough time. From what I've heard, her parents are furious over the incident. They paid the compensation, but until she repays it in full, she's not even allowed to see Colton. Meanwhile, we are living a happy life, following Ryan's philosophy. We carefully save the inheritance we received and make sure not to squander it, even though we have money. Since then, Nolan has been working diligently and was recognized for his abilities. John from B asked him, "Why don't you come to work for our company?" So he changed jobs, and now he seems to be an executive at the company where John is the CEO. I still consider Colton my grandson despite everything that happened, so I asked Grace's parents if I could visit him. He recently got into his first choice high school, so we celebrated by going out for a delicious meal. The incident with Aaron and Grace remains a deep emotional scar, but it also taught us the importance of relationships. I will use this lesson to live my life going forward. Oh no, my bank book is missing. I distinctly remember placing it at the back of this drawer. Could it be them? Despite supporting my eldest son and his wife, who have been living together for several years, they've ignored me for 3 years without even saying thank you. I simply wanted them to show a little gratitude. But it's okay now. I will never forgive them. I'm a 56-year-old retiree, having left my job to care for my unstable mother-in-law. Currently, I work from home while providing care. Although I was a few years away from retirement, I couldn't leave my mother-in-law living alone, so I decided to live with her. My husband is away on business and comes home once a month at best. But when he does, he brings lots of vegetables and Japanese sweets that my mother-in-law likes. Thank you. I'm so grateful for everything you do for me. I wish I could have fed your father too. My mother-in-law says every time she expresses her gratitude to us. My father-in-law passed away over 10 years ago from cancer, unable to eat his favorite foods in the end. My mother-in-law often regrets not having done tests earlier, and she wishes she could have fed him the delicious foods she eats now. My mother-in-law's condition varies greatly from day to day. Some days she's bedridden and barely eats, while on other days she's energetic and goes for a walk by herself. Her unpredictable behavior often surprises me, but as long as she enjoys her days, I'm happy to watch over her. However, there's a troublesome event that occurs 2 or 3 times a month for both my mother-in-law and me. It's when my eldest son and his wife from the neighborhood show up. Mom, Grandma, long time no see. Were you well? We're starving. Can you make something to eat right away? Sorry to intrude, mother-in-law. I'm hungry, so please hurry, they demand. Tom and Catherine, who got married a year ago, frequently visit our house like this, appearing suddenly and even asking for pocket money. They seem to know when the mother-in-law's pension comes in. Hey, Grandma, today's the day your pension comes in, right? Sorry, but could you donate a little to us, the less fortunate? I think to myself, it's starting again. Every time. They don't leave until they get the money. Tom, enough is enough. What about your job? Aren't you working? Stop begging for Grandma's precious pension. However, my attempts to intervene usually end in a quarrel. I relay everything to my husband, who's away on business. He just sighs in exasperation, muttering about what a troublemaker our son is for not holding a steady job. What is he even doing? Just got married. And he's already hopeless, my husband remarks. Though he scolds our son over the phone, it seems to have no effect. This constant cycle of their visits leaves my mother-in-law and me exhausted, losing the will to do anything else. I'm tired, really. It's like they drain all my energy, I confess. Initially, we'd endured their visits, thinking it was only 2 or 3 times a month. But their frequency increased, adding to our stress. Then, in the middle of a weekday, my son suddenly arrived home. I got fired from my job, and for a while, I want to live here, he announced. He had been repeatedly absent without leave, even losing a USB containing important company data. Initially facing a pay cut, he ended up fighting with his boss and getting fired. Despite being clearly at fault, he seemed unrepentant. Seriously, none of them even do their jobs properly and act all high and mighty. That's why I hate people who act like they're elite, my son grumbled. He declared his intention to move in next week, dismissing our concerns about his grandmother's health. Despite my attempts to refuse, he remained stubborn, insisting that his decision was final. Faced with his determination, I couldn't help but sigh. If my husband were here, he would sternly scold them and send them away, but I can't stand up to them alone. Hey, Emily, is Tom moving in here? If so, should I go to a facility? I'll be in the way. And those kids aren't even working, my mother-in-law fretted. Don't worry about such things, mother-in-law. I'll make sure Tom gets a job, and he'll be leaving soon, I reassured her. I feel terribly sorry for making my elderly mother-in-law worry like this. We doted on our only son, but we never intended to raise him to be so unreasonable. The son I knew was kind and considerate, but he clearly changed after meeting his wife, Catherine. To ease my mother-in-law's worries, I offer her assurance. I reassured my mother-in-law, "You don't have to worry about anything. I intend to take good care of you." I repeated my explanation several times, and gradually the tension on her face eased. However, the day my son and his wife moved in arrived sooner than expected. Despite having separate bedrooms, we rearranged the rooms to share one, as my mother-in-law felt insecure being alone. Her desire to share a room highlighted her anxiety. Unfortunately, their behavior from the first day was appalling. "Hey, Mom, we're planning to use the entire second floor for our room. That's okay, right? From today, the second floor bathroom is ours only. You guys don't come upstairs, okay? We're still technically newlyweds, and we don't want unnecessary people coming and going, so please understand," my son announced. They even moved all the stuff from my workroom to the hallway on the same day, leaving me speechless. It became clear that if I stayed silent, they would continue to do and say whatever they wanted. My son added, "Mom, the mortgage on this house is still ongoing, right? I don't plan to pay rent until I find a job, nor do I intend to pay for groceries or utilities. So take care of it." Feeling increasingly irritated, I reluctantly responded, I see." From then on, I was ignored by my son and his wife. A week passed since they moved in, and there were no signs of my son job hunting. His wife left dirty dishes unwashed, neglected laundry, and they freely used our car without asking. leaving it full of trash and low on gas without refueling. Overwhelmed with responsibilities, my mother-in-law, who should be relaxing, ended up helping with the housework. Realizing this was wrong, I confronted my son. Tom, are you even job hunting? You can't just stay at home all the time. Do something, at least clean up your dishes. However, he continued to ignore me. Complaining to his wife, he said, "Lately, I've been hearing these hallucinations. Just now, I heard something about job hunting or whatever. We have a place to live and food to eat, so why work? Stupid." They laughed about it, referring to my mother-in-law and me as hallucinations and ghosts. Despite our frustration, my mother-in-law and I decided to let them be for a bit longer, believing our chance for payback would come eventually. We constantly talked about them when they weren't around, discussing our options to get them out of the house and make them regret their actions. Sharing a bedroom, we spent the entire day excitedly discussing our plan in this challenging situation. I might have succumbed to depression if I were facing this alone, but being together makes it feel like we can get through it. Almost 3 years have passed since they moved in, and it's been 3 years since they started ignoring us. Perhaps they think we're ghosts. True, they haven't paid a penny for rent or living expenses. Their savings must be running out soon, right? Indeed, they might be covering their cell phone bills and dining out. But I've heard they're estranged from Catherine's parents, so financial help seems unlikely. They may ignore us now, but surely they'll come to us for help once they run out of money. We've decided that's when we'll take our revenge. It was 2 weeks after that conversation, when we were busy preparing for my mother-in-law's clinic visit. I noticed my son acting fidgety since morning, not seeming hungry but searching for something. Knowing he would ignore me if I spoke, I pretended not to notice and left for the hospital. Upon returning home, I discovered my son and his wife were gone, and my bank book was missing. Thinking the worst, I went to check my bedroom. Oh no, my bank book is missing. I'm sure I put it in the back of this drawer. Could it be them? I thought. It was too much, even criminal. My mother-in-law came and asked, "Emily, what's wrong? You look pale. Did something happen?" So, I told her that Tom and Catherine stole my bank book. They took the bank book that was kept here. The house mortgage is $2,000 a month, and on top of that, I've been supporting my son and his wife who haven't paid a penny. This is the result. I didn't expect them to say thank you, but I at least wanted them to show some gratitude. But it's okay now. I will never forgive them. Despite the theft, according to my online banking, no money had been withdrawn from the account yet. I rushed to the bank to close the account. They were mistaken if they thought they could withdraw cash with just the bank book without knowing the PIN and without the seal. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became at my son and his wife. I informed my husband about the stolen bank book, and he said, "It's over. We can disown them for all I care." My mother-in-law suggested reporting to the police, but we decided to leave the house as quickly as possible, making it our last resort. I couldn't let them run wild anymore and refused to be taken advantage of. Despite feeling sorry for the sudden upheaval, we chose to stay at a hot spring inn until the problem was resolved. Mother-in-law, I'm sorry. I'll work on resolving this issue quickly, so please bear with it here for a while. Don't worry about me. Besides, I'm happy to stay at such a luxurious inn. At that moment, I resolved that once this problem was settled, I would definitely find a comfortable new home for my mother-in-law. A few days later, after completing various procedures, I finally had a moment to relax. Then, unexpectedly, I received a call much sooner than I had anticipated, and of course, the caller was my son. "Hello, Mom. You haven't been home lately. Are you on a trip?" Gran was not there either, so I was just wondering what happened and got worried, he said, his voice clearly trembling and upset. It's odd, isn't it? He ignored me for 3 years, yet now he can talk when he's in trouble. What's the matter? This is the first time you've spoken to me in 3 years. Do you need something? By the way, I have no business with you guys. Don't say that, please. I don't understand. but we received a notice to vacate the house by the end of the month. It's our own house, so what's going on? He explained. The real estate agent, outraged by our story, had swiftly proceeded with the paperwork, sending the eviction notice within 2 days. Impressed by the real estate agent's prompt action, I decided to reveal the truth to my son. That house! I sold it because I thought it was no longer needed, and it seems the new buyer wants you to leave soon. What? Even if you say that, we have nowhere to live. Where are you and Grandma now? Well, come there, my son pleaded, still trying to use us even in this situation. Enough is enough, I thought. Why are you crying to me now? What a pathetic man. You freeloaded for 3 years, ignoring me and Grandma. Isn't that a bit too convenient? Just so you know, I intend to cut ties with you. Your father agrees with this decision. Don't say that, please. I didn't mean it. I wanted to get along with you and Grandma, and I'm looking for a job too. My son replied, spilling lies that astonished both my mother-in-law and me. If he had shown genuine remorse, we might have reconsidered, but he had already crossed the line by stealing the bank book. By the way, you stole my bank book from the bedroom, didn't you? What were you planning to do with it? You thought as long as you got the money, everything would be fine, right? Lying won't do you any good. No, that's not. I could tell from the other end of the phone that my son was on the verge of tears. Then, realizing my son was useless, his wife took the phone. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Kicking your son and his wife out of their house. Doesn't your heart ache? Are you a demon? Just as I anticipated what she would say next, my daughter-in-law unleashed a barrage of hysterical insults. She went so far as to claim, "You're just living off Grandma's pension too. You're no different from Tham, acting all high and mighty without a job." I was so shocked that I froze for a moment, mouth hanging open. Joeless, do you think I could pay off the mortgage of that big house if I were jobless? I've been paying $2,000 every month, and for your information, I'm not jobless, I retorted. It felt pointless to reveal the truth. Her level of unawareness was apparent. In reality, I earned about $5,000 a month from my remote work. Still, I saw no need to share these details with them. If they had seen the bank book's contents, they might have figured it out. But hey, Catherine, you're jobless too. Yet you always wear branded items. Where did you get those? I think the one acting strange here is you, I pointed out. I suspected, though couldn't confirm, that she was in debt, always carrying new designer bags and wallets. Even my son, before being fired, worked at a decent company and earned a fair salary. It seemed like she was the one who ruined everything. I have no intention of prying into your private affairs, but if you're in debt, you'd better deal with it quickly before things get out of hand. Also, please leave that house as soon as possible. I'll take my leave now. Despite having more to say, I decided to let them face their impending doom on their own. After hanging up, I ignored all the apology emails from my son. My husband, who had also been contacted, dismissed them with even colder words than I did. We have been ignored until now, but it was our turn to ignore them. They should thoroughly enjoy their hellish lives. A few months later, I heard that the couple had moved out of the house into a shabby apartment. Catherine had accumulated a significant amount of debt. Although my son tried to initiate a divorce, they decided to repay the debt together since it was also in his name. With both of them jobless, they struggled to repay and were now busy working while being chased by debt collectors. Their hellish life continued, but they should try their best to overcome it. As for me, I'm currently considering a house to live in with my mother-in-law. My husband is likely to return from his business trip soon, so we're planning to live together in a comfortable house, enjoying a peaceful and happy life. Checking my phone, I noticed there were 13 missed calls, all from my mother-in-law. Not again. Just as this thought crossed my mind, my phone vibrated again. "Hello," I answered, and my mother-in-law shouted loudly. "Brittany, where is this month's $33,000 support money?" "What I'm talking about. The $3,000 for this month hasn't been transferred yet. Her voice dripped with anger, never considering our situation. My patience reached its limit. She never reflected on her words or actions, even in this state. It was time for the last resort. I told my mother-in-law on the other end of the phone, "Your son has passed away, so I can no longer provide support. I am Brittany Wagner, a 32-year-old part-time housewife working at a major financial company. I married about 2 years ago, meeting my husband Justin through a shared hobby. His kindness and wonderful smile captivated me, and after a year of dating, we got engaged. We believed we couldn't find better partners than each other. Everything went smoothly until we faced a problem: my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away years ago, and with no siblings, the only family left was my mother-in-law. Trouble started when we visited her to announce our engagement. As I greeted her, Sandra, my mother-in-law, showed her displeasure. "Are you Justin's fiancé?" "Yes, I am. My name is Brittany Wagner." "Nice to meet you." You seem rather plain. I wonder what Justin sees in you." It's curious. I couldn't tell if she was serious or joking. Shocked, I heard such words from the mother of the man I loved. Seeing my distress, Justin looked displeased with his mother. "Wait, Mom, why would you say something like that all of a sudden? Why can you so casually say such awful things about the person I brought? It's different. I just want to choose the right woman for you. I brought her here because I decided to marry her. It's not up to you to comment on my choice, Destin. You don't have to be so cold. I'm just thinking about what's best for you." The argument between mother and son unfolded, creating a tense atmosphere. As it was my first meeting with my mother-in-law, I couldn't intervene. The uncomfortable air lingered even after the argument, but ultimately, we conveyed our intention to marry. As we left, Sandra spoke to Justin in a somewhat disgruntled tone. "Hey, Justin, you'll keep that promise even after we get married, right?" "Huh? What promise?" "You know about the promise of financial support." "Ah, that. I will continue to do it as always. Please don't bring this up in front of Brittany." The atmosphere between my husband and his mother had been tense for a while, making the air feel heavy. On the way back in the car, I asked Justin about something that had been on my mind. "Hey, Justin, about what you and your mother were discussing when we were leaving." "Ah, yeah. I suppose I should discuss something with you. I heard about financial support, and since my dad passed away, I've been sending money to my mom every month." "How much are you sending?" $2,000 each month." "What? $2,000? I raised my voice unconsciously, shocked by the amount. Justin sighed deeply and began to speak slowly. "Actually, my mom is in debt." "Debt?" "Yeah, she got into debt from gambling in the past. She's been paying it off and living on that. But her legs aren't in good shape anymore. So she spends more time at home now, and she still needs money to live, right?" "Well, yes, but I still think $2,000 is too much." "I know, but if I even slightly reduce the amount, she keeps calling me persistently." "Well, a parent is still a parent, you know. I worry about her since we can't live together." "I see. Justin is incredibly caring towards his mother, but it can't be helped. Since his father passed away, his mother is the only family he has left. No matter what her character is like, she's still an important mother to Justin. At that time, all I could think was what a kind person my husband was. Then, one day, 2 months after we got married, during my lunch break, I received a call on my smartphone. It was from my mother-in-law. "Hello." "Yes," I answered, and she began speaking in a cheerful tone. "It's been a while, Brittany. I have something to discuss. Are you free now?" "Yes, I'm free. What's going on?" "Well, I was thinking maybe you could also start sending me some financial support." I was speechless at her unexpected request, but my mother-in-law continued happily. "You mentioned you work at a financial company, right? So you must have a good salary." "No, that's not the case." "Are you trying to lie to me because you don't want to give me money?" "That's not what I'm saying." "Then why not?" "But Mother, Justin is still sending you money every month, isn't he?" "Yes, he is." She didn't seem to appreciate the support she was already receiving. I spoke up firmly. Please listen calmly, mother-in-law. Continuing to send as much as $2,000 a month is a really big deal, you know? And yet, you still want more. I can't understand that. Oh, is that so? You say that. But if you could just contribute the remaining $1,000, Justin wouldn't be burdened. What do you mean by that? I have Justin as a co-signer on my debt, which means if I default on my payments, the creditors will come after him. Do you understand what I'm saying? What? But wasn't the $2,000 Justin sends used for paying off the debt? Well, the thing is, it's not enough. I haven't told Justin yet, but the debt is quite substantial. It seemed from the way my mother-in-law spoke that this was a truth unknown to my husband. If we were to have children in the future, it would inevitably mean more expenses. On top of that, paying off my mother-in-law's debt wouldn't be easy. However, if her repayments fell behind by the time the debt transferred to Justin, the interest would likely have ballooned significantly. It was easy to foresee that refusing to help now would ultimately burden my husband. Realizing that, the best course might be to ensure she pays off her debt completely. I hesitantly conveyed to my mother-in-law, "I understood. I'll contribute to the support as well." Really, Brittany? You're amazing. I knew you would say that. Combined with Justin's, it'll be $3,000 a month. This will be used to properly pay off the debt, right? Of course. I plan to pay off the entire amount in about a year. Please promise to pay it off without any delay. Okay, I understand. It's a promise. So I'll be expecting the support starting from this month, my mother-in-law said, unilaterally ending the call. The stress piled onto my exhausted body, and I felt increasingly depressed. $1,000 every month, that's a significant burden, but it's necessary to prevent future troubles for us as a couple. And if my mother-in-law can't live properly, Justin wouldn't like that either. That evening, I promptly reported this to my husband. He said, "You shouldn't have to go through all this trouble." But I had already agreed with my mother-in-law. I explained it was a tough decision made to avoid future burdens on us. With a look of regret, my husband said, "I'm really sorry, but thank you," showing understanding for my decision. Time passed, and 2 years have gone by since this decision. The support, which was supposed to end in a year, is still ongoing, and we continue to transfer $3,000 to my mother-in-law every month. To complicate matters, my husband fell ill about 2 months ago and has been unable to work. He's on sick leave and receiving a small amount of sickness allowance, but it's minuscule compared to his usual salary. Last month, I used my savings to send the $3,000 to my mother-in-law. But if this continues, even our living expenses will become difficult. Incredibly, my mother-in-law hasn't once visited Justin in the hospital. I informed her a long time ago about his hospitalization, but instead of visiting, she only contacts me to ensure the continuation of the support. Frustrated by her behavior, I finally brought up the subject with my husband. "Justin, your mother only talks about money. Even knowing you're hospitalized, we need to seriously consider whether to continue the support." "Yeah, I've been thinking the same. I don't want to burden Brittany any further. She's been calling and messaging this month asking, is the support coming?" Seriously, even though her own son is in the hospital, all she thinks about is money. Justin, looking somewhat gaunt, expressed his anger towards his mother. Then, with a sudden idea, he said, "Ah, I've got it," and smiled. "What is it, Justin?" "Well, I just thought of something. It's a last resort, though. Something good." "About my mother?" "Huh, what?" My husband proposed an unexpected plan. It might seem excessive, but it seemed the only way to get through to my mother-in-law in her current state. A few weeks later, Justin was discharged from the hospital, fortunately in good health. Since there was no response from my mother-in-law despite numerous attempts to contact her, we hadn't informed her of my husband's discharge date. For the past 2 weeks or so, she had been incessantly demanding financial support. There's no need to purposely send money to a mother who doesn't even worry about her son. my husband remarked while having coffee. As we relaxed, a message came to my smartphone. On closer inspection, there were 13 missed calls from my mother-in-law. Not again. As my phone vibrated again, it was another call from my mother-in-law. I deliberately turned on the speaker so that my husband could hear, and my mother-in-law immediately started shouting, "Brittany, where's this month's $3,000 support?" "What I'm talking about, the $3,000 for this month hasn't been transferred yet." "Mother, please calm down. Do you realize right now Justin is? I don't care if he's sick or whatever. You work at a good company. You must have plenty of savings. Hurry up and transfer it to me." My mother-in-law furiously shouted, eventually saying something unbelievable. "Do you get it? You married Justin and became his wife, so when Justin can't pay because he's sick, you should pay me. If you don't, I'll make you the co-signer of the debt." At that moment, something inside me snapped. She always exposed her greed, never considering our situation. My patience with her had reached its limit. Doesn't she reflect on her words or actions even in this situation? If that's the case, I have no choice but to play my last card. I firmly told my mother-in-law over the phone, "Your son has passed away, so I can no longer provide support." My mother-in-law responded with a dumbfounded, "Ha." Justin's proposed last resort was to lie to my mother-in-law that my husband had died and see her reaction. If she showed even a hint of sadness, reflected on her past behavior, and sincerely apologized, then I would consider continuing the support. But if she showed no remorse and still demanded money, I was ready to completely sever ties. I thought even a mother obsessed with money would deeply reflect upon hearing about her son's death. However, the moment she heard it, my mother-in-law started laughing loudly. "Ha ha ha. What's so funny? Because if Justin is dead, that means I'll get a share of the inheritance, right? I've been researching it, you know. I started looking into it as soon as I heard Justin got sick. You're entitled to 2/3 of Justin's estate, and the remaining 1/3 is mine." I was dumbfounded. Normally, if one hears their child is sick, they would first look for treatment or useful information. But she had been researching inheritance division. My anger reached its limit, and I was beyond appalled. My husband seemed to feel the same way, and we exchanged glances before he slowly nodded. It was a sign to continue with the plan. Once again, I spoke firmly to my mother-in-law. "Mother, did you listen to what I said? Your son Justin has passed away." "I've heard you, so what? Aren't you sad your son has died before you?" "Oh, right. I was worried I wouldn't get the monthly support anymore. But well, if I'm getting the inheritance, that's fine. How can you, for now, just make sure you give me 1/3 of the inheritance, okay? If you try to run off with it all by yourself, I'll never forgive you." The call ended abruptly, and the dial tone echoed in my ears. Casually glancing at my husband, I saw his face turn red with anger, his body shaking. "Justin, calm down. Are you okay?" As I casually asked my husband, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I've decided I should cut ties with such a person. She will surely come here demanding money eventually, so let's wait until then." "Yeah, you're right, Justin. Are you really okay with this, cutting ties with your mother like this?" "Yeah, I am. After hearing what she said on the phone, I have no regrets. Someone who can say such things without batting an eye is not a parent." His eyes were filled with hatred, turning red. I felt the same way. A person who thinks only about money, even over her son's life, is not family. A few days later, as expected, my mother-in-law showed up at our house. I managed the situation for the time being and asked Justin to hide in the next room. Then, my mother-in-law approached me with a fierce look and pressed me aggressively. "Brittany, hand over Justin's inheritance right now." "Huh? That topic again? Don't you have anything else to say? Justin's dead, isn't he? What's the point of saying anything now? It's meaningless. You have the nerve to say that when you didn't even visit him in the hospital. Can you even call yourself his parent? You're so noisy. Just give me the inheritance right now. I'll call a lawyer if I have to." At that moment, I realized that talking to her was just a waste of time. Just then, my husband emerged from the next room. Seeing him, my mother-in-law let out a loud gasp as if she'd seen a ghost. "Justin, why, you're supposed to be dead." "Mom, long time no see. Sorry, but the story about me being dead was a lie." "A lie, you say? Why would you say such a disrespectful thing?" "To expose your true nature and confirm it for myself. I wondered how you would manage the monthly financial support if I, your son, were dead. But unfortunately, you turned out to be the worst kind of person, only thinking about money. This situation made that very clear." That's Justin, calling your own parents the worst kind of person. Quiet. I'm cutting ties with a toxic parent like you. As my husband shouted, Sandra stood there open-mouthed, stunned. She hadn't yet come to terms with the reality of being disowned by her own son. "Wait, what do you mean, Justin?" "Well, I just said, I'm cutting ties. I can't consider someone like you my mother. Don't say that." "So, what about the financial support?" "Why would I support you? You need to find a way to pay off your own debt. We've decided to move away." "Wait, without the support, I won't be able to live." Tears in her eyes, my mother-in-law reached out to my husband. He forcefully brushed her hand away, looked at her coldly, and said, "I don't care about your life. You never once apologized for all the trouble you caused us, did you? Knowing your true nature now, I feel relieved. Don't ever show your face to us again. That's cruel." "Wait, Justin, are you really going to abandon your mother?" Ignoring her words, my husband grabbed her arm and dragged her to the front door. Then he threw her bag and shoes outside and kicked her out of the house. She made a scene outside, but apparently unable to bear the stares of onlookers, she left after a while. Persistent calls and emails came, but we ignored them all. We blocked her number and quickly finished moving. The co-signing of the debt turned out to be something Sandra had fabricated, so the guarantee contract was void, and Justin no longer had any responsibility as a guarantor. Having lost all support from us, my mother-in-law was apparently living a miserable life. It was no surprise since she had used almost all the money we sent for gambling. The remaining debt was substantial, and she spent her days being chased by debt collectors. Working from morning till night, she couldn't gamble anymore. It's unlikely that she will pay off all her debt anytime soon. From now on, she will have to work until her body can no longer move. It's all her own doing. Meanwhile, we are living fulfilling days in our new home. Justin's condition stabilized, and he was able to return to work after recovering. And now there's a new life growing inside me. Next year, our family will grow by one, and we will start a new life. In the future, we want to spend peaceful and happy days as a family of 3. Oh, isn't this exquisite? It's not just lovely. It's a pink diamond, and it comes with a price tag of $50,000. My mother-in-law, who couldn't be bothered to attend my own mother's funeral, appears to be relishing a lavish getaway with her friends, completely oblivious to my presence. She gleefully shared details about her new sparkling pink diamond ring, seemingly fueled by jealousy towards a friend who flaunted a similar ring. In her triumph, she revels in having outdone her friend by choosing a more expensive ring from the same store. However, the reality is far from what it seems. It's implausible for her to afford such a costly item, and it turns out she had secretly taken money from my husband's safe to make the purchase. This money, crucial for her future, had been earmarked for her nursing home fees. My name is Hillary Johnson, a 46-year-old woman living with my husband Steve, who is 7 years my senior, and our high school senior daughter Gina. Despite not being wealthy, we lead a stable life. I have worked part-time at a local drugstore for over a decade, and my hobby is cultivating herbs. Lately, I've been challenging myself with a medical herb certification exam. Gina and I often discuss her future dreams, bringing us joy. 6 months ago, my father-in-law passed away, introducing significant changes to our modest lifestyle. According to his will, the house went to Steve, and the cash to my mother-in-law. The money was intended for her nursing home fees, given her age of 75. Despite this, she pleaded tearfully to live in the house, and after much debate, we agreed to cohabitate for a year while searching for a suitable home. The area where the family home is situated has now become a popular high-end residential area. Still, we are not wealthy. It's an old landholding. I learned that my mother-in-law had a habit of spending recklessly, and though I had prepared for it to some extent, the reality was shocking. As Steve heads out for dinner shopping, my mother-in-law, on the first day of our cohabitation, casually asks, "Hillary, could you lend me some money? I'm going out." "Thank you. Just in case something comes up, and I need more, give me $100 for now," she says under the pretext of buying dinner. I found myself pondering how much groceries she intended to purchase. Despite my reservations, I made the mistake of giving her the requested amount. 2 hours later, she returned by taxi, laden with bags from an upscale department store filled with expensive deli items and sweets. "Tonight, we feast. I wanted to try these side dishes. They're supposed to be delicious, and we have desserts too," she exclaimed proudly. Curious, I asked, "Mother, how much did this cost?" She replied, "Well, let's see. I went a bit over because of the taxi, but I covered the extra, so it's fine." Her proud declaration left me speechless, but little did I know this was just the beginning. Managing finances became my biggest headache after moving to the family home. While my father-in-law was alive, we used online supermarkets for groceries, paying with his card. Learning from my initial mistake of giving her large sums of money, I no longer entrusted her with shopping and kept the wallet in a locked drawer. Unhappy with not receiving money, she stopped doing any housework, caring only for the flowers at the entrance. Despite our monthly allowance of $300, she squandered it on clothes, beauty salons, meals, or coffee with neighbors. By mid-month, she would usually run out of money and ask for more. Frustrated by her reckless spending, as I was saving for my daughter's education, I calmly admonished her when she requested more money for a lunch date with friends. "Even Steve, who works, gets an allowance of $300. I can't give you more than someone who's working, so please use it more wisely." Dissatisfied, she returned to her room, likely to ask Steve for money later. The allowance came from the nursing home fund, and if it diminished, it would be her who suffered. When Steve came home, I expressed my concerns. "Did your mother ask you for more allowance again?" He replied, "Yes, she did. But I can't be too hard on her. She must be lonely without Dad. She's always been vain, you know. But I want to fulfill her wishes for at least this year that she's here." "I understand, but your kindness isn't truly benefiting her. Besides, it will eventually have repercussions for us." "You're right. I get it. My mother-in-law had a tendency to flaunt, especially in front of her 3 old friends who were mothers of my husband's classmates living in the neighborhood. I became aware of this during the funeral arrangements for my father-in-law. "Steve, it's your father's funeral, so arrange the altar this way and get more extravagant flowers. The neighbors are coming. Don't embarrass your father," she instructed. Steve, being the spouse, complied with her demands to some extent, but the costs were significantly high. My mother-in-law's primary aim was to show off to the neighbors. I even felt sympathy for her, having to keep up with people from a different lifestyle. During the funeral, she only greeted 3 families of her friends. One day, after having lunch with her friends, she came back excited, her eyes sparkling. Today, Debbie showed me a ring worth $20,000 that she got from her husband for their golden wedding anniversary. "I've never seen a $20,000 ring before. That's a wonderful gift. You don't have such wealthy friends, do you, Hillary? You'll probably never see anything like that in your life," she remarked with superiority and sarcasm, using her friends to boast. "Hillary, you're so plain. Why don't you put on some makeup? Have you ever been to an upscale lunch?" It was all about one-upping me. I tried to ignore her words, but she seemed increasingly hostile towards me, especially after I refused to give her more money. After settling my father-in-law's affairs and starting to look for a nursing home, my mother's health took a turn for the worse. When my sister and I rushed to the hospital, the doctor informed us that she had about 3 months to live due to advanced cancer. She was in a fragile state and could deteriorate at any time. My mother had occasionally mentioned feeling unwell before, but being a person of great endurance, it wasn't easy for her to show any signs of weakness. I regretted not paying more attention to her. I asked my sister to stay with her while I went to fetch some clothes and valuables from her apartment. As I packed a large bag in her room, I found some cash, likely her living expenses for the month, in a drawer. I took the cash with me, planning to shower and head back to the hospital. I left the bag in Steve's upstairs room and, after getting ready, noticed the zipper slightly open. A sense of unease washed over me as I checked the bag and found the cash missing. Suppressing my rising anger, I went downstairs to my mother-in-law's room. "Mother, may I ask you something?" I inquired as she prepared to leave. Turning around, she asked, "How's your mother doing? I have plans with my friends right now." I confronted her. "The money that was in the bag in our room, you have it, don't you? That money belongs to my mother. Please return it." "I don't know what you're talking about. I never go upstairs." "Are you accusing me of stealing?" she retorted, rushing past me and heading for the door. "I'm going out for a fancy Chinese dinner with my friends tonight, so I don't need your poor excuse for a meal. Give my regards to your mother." With a smirk on her face, she left the house, leaving me in shock. Just then, Jenna came home and asked, "Mom, are you okay?" "Your grandmother's money. My mother-in-law took it." Unable to confront her without evidence, tears naturally started to fall from my eyes. Jenna gently stroked my back to calm me down. "That's terrible. It must have been her. I've seen her coming down from upstairs before. To think she would stoop to taking your grandmother's money. I can't forgive her. But how's Grandma? If you're going to the hospital, I'll come with you. Let's think of a way to get back at her." As we walked, Jenna's words encouraged me, lightening my heart a bit. Despite feeling sorry for my father-in-law, I decided to protect my family in my own way. A few days later, my mother's condition suddenly worsened, and she passed away. In her final days, she was mostly in a daze, occasionally lucid. I expressed my gratitude to her repeatedly for raising me, for her love, for Gina's future dreams, for the plans with Steve, and for our old age. She didn't speak, but her eyes smiled gently and sometimes nodded. While talking to her, I remembered a visit to my father-in-law before his death. He had thought about divorcing my mother-in-law, but didn't want to trouble his son and his wife. He asked me to sell the house and put my mother-in-law in a nursing home after his death. That's when he told me about her spending habits. Her attitude changed when Steve started kindergarten, living in a wealthy area, feeling pressure to keep up with rich neighbors. She deluded herself into thinking she was wealthy too, possibly fueled by Steve's success in a famous company. I regretted not putting her in a nursing home sooner. It could have prevented the theft of my mother's money. Steve and Gina arrived in time for my mother's final moments, but only my sister and her husband were there at the end. When we returned home to prepare for the funeral, my mother-in-law was out. I decided to show her the last bit of kindness. We held a small funeral for my mother without her presence. I tried calling her, but she was out and never answered. When I returned home after the funeral, everything was quiet as if she had stayed out overnight. Then, my mother-in-law returned in a good mood. "My condolences for your loss. It must have been hard," she greeted me. I noticed a shiny new jewel in her hand that I had never seen before. "Oh, this look, isn't it beautiful?" "A pink diamond. It cost $50,000. How did you get that, Mother?" I asked. She replied, "I bought it, of course." Debbie introduced me to the store. It's a reservation-only place in New York City, so I went for an overnight stay with my friends. The hotel we stayed at, and the meals were wonderful. To my astonishment, my mother-in-law indulged in luxuries during my mother's funeral, enjoying an overnight trip to New York with friends. I was left speechless with disbelief. I bought something even more expensive than what Debbie showed me. "Feels good, Mother," my mother-in-law declared. I couldn't comprehend how she obtained such an expensive item. You don't have that kind of money. How did you get it? I questioned. Nonchalantly, she replied, Oh, I found it in Steve's room safe. My passbook was in there with exactly $50,000. Since it's in my passbook, it's my money, right? I felt frozen and disappointed by her actions during my mother's funeral, although, in all honesty, her behavior was somewhat expected. It was confirmed that she had entered our room upstairs. The passbook was in the safe of the study room that Steve now uses. The safe was an old dial type, and Steve, finding it tedious to turn the dial, left it unlocked, thinking the study was locked anyway. On the day my mother passed away, I intentionally left the study unlocked, suspecting that she might take the opportunity to enter our room and take the passbook from the safe. That $50,000 is from my father's inheritance. Do you understand what that means? I asked her. Unperturbed, she replied, I know it's my money left by your father. So what's wrong with using it? I began to feel pity for my mother-in-law. Sure, it's your money and you're free to use it. But that was meant for your old age. We'll be moving out, so please manage on your own from now on. At first, my mother-in-law looked confused, but she slowly turned pale as she understood my words. Wait, isn't there a separate fund for the nursing home? It's more than this amount, right? She inquired. I explained, yes, there was more, but it decreased due to the inflated funeral costs of my father-in-law and your monthly requests for more allowance from Steve. Feeling the need to illustrate the alternatives, I handed her brochures of lovely nursing homes I had collected over several months. She looked at them speechless and shaking. At that moment, Steve and Gina came down from upstairs. I had reported to them after opening the study, so they had come to check. Steve, initially skeptical that his mother had stolen the money, had no complaints about what I did. While I would have properly arranged for my mother-in-law's nursing home if nothing had happened, her intrusion into our room and the theft of the money prompted me to protect my family. I had made it clear that entering our room and touching the money was unacceptable. I decided to sever ties with her for life. Steve, you'll stay in this house, right? It's sad to sell a house filled with memories, but taking care of parents is a son's duty. I desperately clung to Steve. Checking the safe, I realized she had taken more than the passbook, the cash I withdrew for the car inspection too. That's too much. I trusted you, Steve, I said, shocked by her actions. Struggling to speak, Steve admitted, Oh, I have it. Just borrowed a bit. It was $11,000. But that wasn't all. What about Hillary's mother's money? I demanded. Panicking, she replied. Oh, I'll return that too. Then it's fine, right, Hillary? You'll forgive me now, won't you? She hastily handed me the money, possibly pretending about the $50,000 ring. Until the end, there were no words of apology about my mother's money. I'm sorry, but I can't live with you anymore. I'll protect my own family from now on, I declared. She broke down crying, clinging to Steve till the end. However, Steve's grief-stricken anger was intense, and he acted quickly. He sold her belongings to create a lump sum and found a nursing home affordable on her pension. The chosen home, though, was far from the family home. I probably won't see her again in my lifetime. Steve occasionally gets calls from the home, and she seems calmer now, possibly settling into her new environment. I regretted not placing her in a home earlier. Perhaps if we hadn't lived in that house, her life might have been happier. A part of me felt a little sympathy for her. After she left, we moved, waiting for Gina's graduation. Gina got into her desired university and started living on her own. The family home, being in a popular area, quickly found a buyer. Steve is now applying for a transfer to a branch near the sea. We plan to spend a few years until retirement there, searching for our final home. We hope to continue living peacefully and harmoniously as a family.
Life has a peculiar way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. That's how I met Marco. My name is Cora, and at 28, I was working as a fitness trainer at a local gym, living a life as structured and disciplined as my workout routines. Then one day, Marco walked in, looking for a quick session, and ended up changing the entire course of my life. "Hey, I'm Marco," he said, flashing a smile that could light up the darkest corners. "Heard this is the best place to get in shape. Mind showing me the ropes?" I raised an eyebrow, sizing him up. He didn't exactly fit the mold of the usual gym goer, more like someone who spent his days charming his way through life. "Sure, Marco. Follow my lead, and you'll be in shape in no time. But I warn you, I don't go easy on anyone." He chuckled, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Wouldn't have it any other way. Lead on, Cora." Training Marco was like trying to tame a wild stallion. He had energy for days and a stubborn streak to match. But beneath the jokes and playful banter, there was a genuine connection neither of us could deny. As days turned into weeks, our gym sessions became the highlight of my life. It wasn't just about the workouts anymore. It was about the laughter, the stories, and the moments we shared. One evening, as we wrapped up, Marco turned to me, his usual grin replaced by a serious look. "Cora, I need to tell you something. I'm not just here for the workouts. I'm here for you. You have this fire, this strength I've never seen in anyone else, and I'm crazy about you." I was taken aback. This was Marco, the guy who joked about everything, now standing in front of me, bare and honest. "Marco, I don't know what to say. You're not what I expected, but I can't deny there's something between us. Something real." That was the start of our whirlwind romance, intense and passionate, like a storm that swept everything in its path. Before I knew it, I was saying "I do" to the man who had walked into my gym and turned my world upside down. But the fairy tale didn't last long. After the wedding, Marco dropped a bombshell that would set the stage for the battles to come. "Cora, we need to move into my mother's house. Family is everything to me, and I need to be there for them." My stomach dropped. Maria, his mother, was a force to be reckoned with, sharp-tongued and critical, a stark contrast to Marco's warmth. And then there was Sofia, his sister, a mirror image of her mother's arrogance and disdain. "Marco, are you sure about this? Our relationship with your mother and Sofia is strained, to put it mildly. Is this really the best idea?" I asked, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. He took my hands in his gaze earnest. "I know it's not ideal, but family means everything to me. We'll make it work. I promise. It's me and our little family against the world." Moving into Marco's family home felt like stepping onto a battlefield. Every day was a struggle under Maria's strict rules. "Don't forget the dishes need doing, and the living room needs a good dusting. We run a tight ship here," she would say, her voice dripping with anything but warmth. I would nod, biting back the retorts that threatened to spill. "Of course, Maria. I wouldn't want the house to be anything less than perfect." Sofia would smirk from her perch at the kitchen table, her eyes scanning me like I was some bug under a microscope. "Yeah, Cora, and try to keep up. Will you? We don't need any dead weight around here." The days felt long, the work unending. It was like living in a loop, each day a repeat of the last. Cleaning, cooking, trying to find my footing in a house that felt like a minefield. Marco was there, but not really. His restaurant was his world, and I felt like a ghost in his family home. Then, life threw me another curveball. I was pregnant. The news should have been a beacon of joy, but in Maria's house, it was just another ripple in already troubled waters. "Pregnant, huh?" Maria's voice was flat, her eyes hard. "Well, don't expect any special treatment. This house doesn't run itself, you know." I placed my hand instinctively on my belly. "I don't expect special treatment, Maria, but I do expect some understanding. I'm carrying a child, your grandchild." That shut her up, if only for a moment. But the chores piled up and the glares grew sharper, making the house feel smaller each day. Sophia was no help, watching my struggles with a satisfied smirk. "You're slowing down, Cora," she would taunt. "Can't handle a bit of housework. What kind of mother are you going to be?" I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I held it in for Marco, for the tiny heartbeat grew stronger each day. The tension was a constant companion, an unwelcome guest at every meal and every moment. "Marco, please talk to them," I pleaded one night, the weight of the day heavy on my shoulders. "Your mother and Sophia treat me like I'm nothing, like I don't belong." He sighed, a tired sound that spoke volumes. "Cora, they're just set in their ways. It's how they've always been. Just give it time, it'll get better." But it didn't get better, it got harder. The house became more suffocating, Maria and Sophia more relentless. I was just trying to keep my head above water and protect the tiny life that depended on me. Each night, as I lay in bed, the moon casting shadows across the room, I felt the weight of my reality pressing down, heavier than ever. I made a silent vow. I wouldn't let them break me. Their disdain and sharp words wouldn't define me. I was stronger than they realized, and one day they'd see, this house, this battlefield, would be mine to conquer. Becoming a mother was supposed to be the most beautiful chapter of my life, but in Maria's house, it felt more like a trial by fire. Luca was my little bundle of joy, my ray of sunshine amid the storm. Yet every coo and every cry was met with relentless pressure and criticism from Maria and Sofia. Really, Cora, can't you keep that child quiet? Maria snapped, her tone sharp as knives, every time Luca whimpered. I held him closer, whispering words of comfort, trying to shield him from his grandmother's harshness. He's just a baby, Maria. Babies cry. That's how they communicate. Sofia rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with disdain. Oh, please. You're just not doing it right, Cora. Maybe if you paid more attention to him instead of feeling sorry for yourself, he'd be quieter. Their words stung, each one a reminder of how out of place I felt in this house and this family. It wasn't just the verbal jabs, it was the scrutinizing looks, especially after my body had changed during pregnancy. The weight I'd gained became a favorite topic of ridicule. Looks like those fitness trainer days are long gone, huh, Cora? Maria would chuckle, her smirk infuriating. Better lay off the sweets if you want to fit into your old clothes again. I clenched my fists, forcing a smile to hide my hurt. I'm proud of my body, Maria. It brought Luca into this world. The weight is temporary, but the love I have for my son is forever. But my defiance fell on deaf ears. I was the outsider, the intruder in their perfect little world. And no matter how hard I tried, it never seemed to be enough. Enough was enough. The constant belittling from Maria and Sofia wasn't just chipping away at my spirit, it was igniting a fire within me, a fire to reclaim my life, my body, and my self-respect. I decided to take control right there in the suffocating walls of that house. I started small, turning the corner of my room into a personal gym. It wasn't much, just a mat, some weights, and a determination as strong as steel. This is it, Luca, I whispered, cradling him in one arm while setting up my phone to record. Mommy's turning it all around, starting now. The first few days were tough. The exercises left me breathless, my muscles screaming in protest. But each drop of sweat and every itching limb felt like a triumph. You think you can just bounce back, Cora? Maria sneered one day, watching me pant through my routine. It's not that easy, you know. Takes more than a few stretches to fix what's broken. I wiped my brow, fixing her with a steely gaze. Watch me, Maria. I'm not just fixing what's broken. I'm building something stronger. I don't need your approval or your snide comments. That's when I decided to go public with my journey. I started a YouTube channel and an Instagram page sharing every struggle and every victory. It was raw and real, and to my surprise, it resonated with so many out there. Look at this, Luca, I'd say, showing him the screen filled with comments and likes. We're not alone. There are so many rooting for us. Then came the offers from advertisers, turning my little corner of the internet into a thriving source of income. I was stunned and overwhelmed. But above all, I felt empowered. Can you believe this, Luca? I whispered, tucking him into bed. We're doing it. We're really doing it. But with every success, the tension in the house grew thicker. Maria and Sofia couldn't stand it, the way I turned their ridicule into armor, their disdain into a driving force. What's this now, Cora? Playing the star while the rest of us do the real work? Sofia spat one day, her eyes filled with venom. I stood my ground, Luca on my hip, my heart stronger than ever. It's called turning the tide, Sofia. It's called taking back control. And if that bothers you, well, that's your problem, not mine. What once felt like a prison was now just a backdrop. My world was larger, brighter, filled with the love of my son and the support of a community that saw me for who I truly was. The success of my online channels was a sweet victory, but it brought a new kind of challenge. Marco was stunned by the numbers, the comments, the sheer scale of it all. But his pride was bruised. He didn't want the world, especially his family, to see the shift in our roles. Cora, this is incredible, he said one evening, his eyes pleading. But you know how my mother and Sofia are. Please, let's keep this between us. I don't want them thinking I'm not the provider. I sighed, the weight of his request heavy on my shoulders. Marco, I'm proud of what I've achieved. It's not just about the money. It's about respect, about independence. He nodded, reaching for my hand. I know, and I respect that. But in this house, it's complicated. Let's just keep it our little secret for now. Reluctantly, I agreed and began transferring $4,000 a month to Marco's account. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Maria and Sofia continued their tirade, oblivious to the truth. They saw me as a leech, living off their precious son and brother. "You're just a freeloader, Cora, always taking and never contributing," Maria snarled, her words as sharp as ever. I held back my retort, using my silent shield against her barbs. "I contribute in my own way, Maria, not that you'd ever acknowledge it." Sofia was no better. "What do you even do all day, Cora? Lounge around while we do all the real work." Their ignorance was a bitter pill to swallow, but I swallowed it anyway. My focus was on Luca, my channels, my newfound strength. I'd walk with my son in the park, my camera constant companion, capturing moments, workouts, and the real me that they refused to see. "Cora, you're wasting your time with those videos," Maria scoffed, watching me edit my latest post. But the numbers told a different story. The subscribers, the views, the comments. They were real, tangible, and they were mine. Maybe to you, Maria, but to me and to thousands out there, it's anything but a waste, I replied, my confidence unwavering. Marco's restaurant troubles added another layer to our already complicated life. One day, he approached me, his pride barely holding back his desperation. "Cora, the restaurant is struggling. I need help. Could you? Would you lend me some money just to tide things over?" His vulnerability was a rare sight, tugging at my heartstrings. "Of course, Marco, I'll help. But this isn't just a loan. It's an investment in us, in our family." His relief was palpable, but it was tinged with the unspoken truth. I was the lifeline, the silent savior of the family facade. As I transferred $10,000, I watched the gratitude and guilt flicker in his eyes. I sensed the balance had shifted. Time in that house felt like a ticking bomb, with each day bringing us closer to an explosion. Sofia's marriage introduced her husband, Rick, into our already cramped space, and his presence only heightened the chaos and tension that had become a constant in our lives. "You two just take up space," Maria sneered, her words slicing through the crowded living room. "You're nothing but freeloaders, Cora, you and that kid." I clenched my teeth, hugging Luca closer. "We're family, Maria, or at least that's what a house like this is supposed to mean." But when Sofia announced her pregnancy, Maria's attitude shifted to something even harsher and more direct. "This house is getting crowded, Cora, and frankly, you and your boy are just in the way." The words stung, but before I could muster a response, Marco dropped a bombshell of his own at dinner. "I have to go out of town for a few weeks. Restaurant business," he said, avoiding my gaze. A few weeks in this madhouse without the slightest buffer Marco provided felt like a sentence I couldn't bear. "You're leaving now? With everything going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper over the lump in my throat. He didn't meet my eyes. "I have to, Cora. It's important." And just like that, he was gone. The door shut behind him, and the weight of his absence settled over the house like a thick fog. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Luca. We went for walks, did our workouts in the park, anything to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the house. But when we returned from kindergarten one day, the sight that greeted us froze me in my tracks. Our belongings, bags, suitcases, Luca's toys, were piled outside the front door like trash. "Mommy, what's happening?" Luca's small voice trembled with confusion and fear. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears as I approached the door. "Maria, Sofia, what is this? Why are our things outside?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. The response came cold and merciless from the other side of the door. "You heard me, Cora. The house is too crowded, and you two are just taking up space. It's time for you to leave and find somewhere else to call home." Maria's voice was like a knife, and Sofia's echoing laughter twisted it deeper. I stood there, my whole world collapsing around me. What should I tell Marco? What would I say to my son when he asked where his father, his home had gone? Their laughter was the only answer, a cruel reminder that we were expendable. An inconvenience easily discarded. With a heavy heart and a mind swirling with shock and betrayal, I gathered our belongings. Holding Luca's hand tightly, I stepped away from the house that was never a home. The pain was sharp, the betrayal bitter, but it was the clarity of the moment that struck me most. This was the end of one chapter, a chapter of struggle and pain, but it was also the beginning of something new, something ours. I rented an apartment, a small but safe haven for Luca and me. As I unpacked our lives, the reality of what had happened and what I had escaped began to sink in. I was alone, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense of freedom. Settling into the new apartment was a bittersweet experience. It was a sanctuary where the shadows of Maria's house couldn't reach us. I meticulously arranged our belongings, trying to make the space feel like home when my phone buzzed with a message that sent shockwaves through my world. It was from Sophia, her message laced with sickening glee. "You think you know Marco? Think again, Cora." Attached was a link, a portal to a truth I had never imagined. Trembling, I clicked it, my heart racing. I clicked the link, and my world fractured as the screen lit up with images that shattered my reality. There was Marco, not mired in restaurant troubles but tangled in the arms of another woman. Their intimacy was unmistakable, the photos standing in stark contrast to the lies he had spun for me. The most recent shots were dated just yesterday. The business trip, the stress, everything had been a cruel facade, and I was the unwitting financier of his double life. A numbing cold washed over me, the pain and betrayal intertwining into a fierce resolve. For years I had been the backbone, the silent supporter of a man who lived in shadows while his family treated me like dirt. A week of emotional turmoil was punctuated by incessant calls from Marco, whose voice had once been a source of comfort but was now a trigger for my contempt. "Cora, please, you need to come back. Mom and Sophia crossed the line, and the restaurant is in shambles. I need you. The bills are piling up." His pleas, once capable of tugging at my heartstrings, now ignited nothing but disdain. "So you only need me to pay your bills and your family's bills?" His voice cracked, desperation seeping through. "We're still a family, you, me, Luca. Isn't that worth fighting for?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "A family? Is that what you call this charade?" "No, Marco, we're far from a family. And as for your restaurant, your debts are yours to deal with." Silence fell heavily between us, almost tangible. I could feel the weight of his predicament pressing down on him. "But Cora, the money?" "Your problem, Marco. Your restaurant, your money. I'm done being your lifeline." I cut in, my voice unwavering. "However, we will discuss this tomorrow. I will come to your mother's house." I made my decision. I returned to that house, not as the broken woman they expected, but as the force they never saw coming. Armed with the truth and a plan that would turn their world upside down, I stepped into the lion's den. Marco's face lit up with a mix of hope and surprise, but Maria and Sophia's expressions were cold and calculating. They clearly weren't thrilled about my return. "Look who's back," Maria said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Missed us, have you?" I met her gaze without flinching. "Not at all, Maria. I'm here for something important." I handed Marco an envelope. His face drained of color as he recognized it for what it was: divorce papers. "Marco," I stated, relishing the taste of freedom, "our marriage ends here." Maria and Sophia's initial shock quickly morphed into smiles. "Finally getting rid of the dead weight, and Marco?" Sophia jeered, her laughter grating on my nerves. But their joy was premature. "Don't get too excited," I interjected sharply. "You might want to sit down for this. It's been me, not Marco, keeping this household afloat." The room fell silent, stunned. Marco's eyes darted between me and his family as the truth hung in the air. "It's true," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "The restaurant's been failing. Cora's been covering everything. She transferred $4,000 to me every month." Maria and Sophia turned on him, their faces twisted with anger and disbelief. "You lied to us. You let her pay our bills." Maria's voice was shrill. "What should we do now without her money?" "I'm going to file for alimony," Marco said, desperation clear in his tone. "I earn less, so it's only fair." His mother and sister delighted in this revelation, clapping their hands as if they were celebrating a victory. Their hollow applause echoed in the room, but I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "You think that's going to work, Marco? You won't get a cent from me, especially not after I found out about your affair." The color drained from his face. "How did you?" he stammered, his bravado crumbling. I pointedly looked at Sophia. "Your sister was kind enough to send me all the proof I needed." What erupted next was chaos, accusations flying as betrayals were laid bare. Marco and Sophia shouted at each other, arms flailing amid the frenzy. But I remained calm, my next move crystal clear. "I'm taking back what's mine," I declared, my voice cutting through the noise. "Every appliance, every piece of furniture I paid for. You're left with what you've earned, which is nothing." And that's exactly what I did. I stripped the house of every trace of my financial support, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. Their pleas for mercy and forgiveness fell on deaf ears as I blocked their numbers, severing the last ties to a life of deceit and disrespect. The fallout was swift. Marco's restaurant crumbled under the weight of debt. The house was lost, and Sophia's husband walked away from the wreckage of their family. They were left with nothing but each other and the mistakes they had made, crammed into a rented apartment. As for Luca and me, we flourished in our new life. Our days were filled with love, laughter, and the peace we had fought so hard to find. The past was behind us, a distant memory overshadowed by the bright future we were building together. We were more than survivors. We were conquerors, and our story was just beginning.
I'm Emily, and Jake, who is 2 years my senior, is a man of science, living out his childhood dream with a fulfilling research job. Despite his busy schedule, he seems content. Our 3-year-old son, Mike, shares Jake's love for observation and experimentation, currently fixated on the goldfish he snagged at the fall festival. Meanwhile, our 1-year-old daughter, Sarah, is a delightful eater with her adorable chubby white cheeks, bringing comfort and joy to our household. Life is generally good for our ordinary family, except for one recurring concern: dinner. Just as I was trying to soothe my crying daughter and finish preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. Without hesitation, my mother-in-law walked in, a frequent visitor around this time, enough for Mike to hardly glance away from the TV. "My goodness, fried food again," she exclaimed, expressing concern about its impact on Jake's stomach and the grandkids. Mike, however, loves it. My mother-in-law swiftly took charge, offering a creamy vegetable stew and minestrone, enough to last for at least 3 days. As she set the table, my spirits sank at the sight of the mostly carrot and cabbage-filled stew. Interrupting my thoughts, she insisted I pack up the food she brought. Despite its lack of appeal, wasting food was not an option. This routine, familiar since her last unexpected visit, where she swapped my clam chowder for her fried chicken, concluded with her leaving without acknowledging her grandchildren. After she left, my son softly remarked, "Grandma took my fried chicken again." My heart ached at his sad face, but I assured him there was a little meat left. As I heated up the oil, I felt relieved seeing my son's joyful reaction to the promise of more food. Yet beneath the surface, my dissatisfaction lingered. My mother-in-law's intrusion had escalated since my marriage, peaking over the last year. Each week, unannounced during dinner prep, she would criticize my cooking and parenting, leaving her cream stew behind. In the past 6 months, she started taking our food home, undermining our meals. As I juggled baby food and distracted the kids, the tough task of cooking continued. My family's happiness kept me going, but my fried chicken, braised pork, mapo tofu, and hamburgers, all of it, ended up in her hands. I inherited a love for cooking from my restaurant-running family, particularly my dad, who taught me the art. Confident in my culinary skills, I firmly believe that my cooking surpasses my mother-in-law's overly sweet cream stew. However, since Mike, our son, entered the picture, I've found it challenging to assert myself against his grandmother. When Jake, my husband, returns home after the kids have gone to sleep, he grimaces at dinner. With only Mike's share of fried chicken remaining, I serve Jake a generous portion of the cream stew, resigned to the fact that it's what my mother-in-law brings over. Frustrated by having my skills undermined, I express my discontent to Jake, urging him to tell his mother if he doesn't like it. Jake, as non-committal as ever, pokes at the stew, avoiding confrontation with his mother. Despite her intrusion during Sarah's nap time and taking away Mike's favorite foods, Jake rationalizes it by mentioning her loneliness since his father's passing 2 years ago. I sigh deeply, realizing Jake tends to avoid confrontation when his mother is involved. The only relief is that she hasn't suggested moving in yet. Tired of the routine, my mother-in-law surprises me with a different proposition during one of her dinner visits. She announces that everyone will gather at our place for Christmas this year, a departure from the usual family reunions at her brother-in-law's or her childhood home. Responding with little enthusiasm, I wonder how she plans to host the gathering. She frowns at my apparent lack of understanding and declares that I'll be helping too, assigning me tasks for the 24th. Despite my quick objections, she dismisses my concerns, suggesting I use a baby carrier for Sarah. Not only am I expected to clean up, but I'm also entrusted with preparing the full-course Christmas meal, with a strict warning against repackaging store-bought food or serving anything that tastes bad. Stunned by the audacity of her decision, I try to object, but my mother-in-law, satisfied with her directives, leaves abruptly. When I share the news with Jake that night, he is as bewildered as I am. We contemplate her plans to host a Christmas party, inviting relatives from both his dad's and her sister's families. Frustrated, I finally lose my temper, expressing my feelings of always being pushed around. Jake, realizing the severity of the situation, goes silent and, with a resigned sigh, agrees to handle the cleaning and entertaining of relatives. I'm relieved to hear Jake's proposal. It provides some direction. However, he adds a request. Can you still cook the full-course Christmas meal? Jake gazes at the meatloaf his mother-in-law left for us, making it hard to refuse. After some hesitation, I reluctantly agree. Just for this year, let's keep Mom's reputation intact. Plus, everyone in the family loves your cooking, he pleads. Fine, just for this year. Thanks, man. I can't wait for Emily's Christmas feast, he says cheerfully. I brace myself, knowing it's just for this time, and agree to prepare a full-course Christmas meal. When I inform my mother-in-law that Jake will stay over to help with cleaning, she makes a displeased face, commenting on how the man of the house shouldn't do such things. Despite her discontent, she seems reasonably satisfied seeing Jake bustling around at his parents' home for my sake. Then comes Christmas lunchtime. Emily, is the corn soup ready? I'm preparing the croutons now. I respond, scurrying around the kitchen to get the carpaccio and corn soup ready. You're so inefficient. I'll bring the food myself, she declares. I'm sorry. If you're going to complain, try preparing a meal for 20 people. It's really exhausting. Finally, the serving is done, and I sit down at the party. Jake, having put our daughter down for a nap in another room, has been supportive. Preparing a full-course Christmas meal for 20 people was challenging, but it feels good to see everyone enjoying my cooking. However, that good feeling lasts only a moment. This quiche looks so beautiful. It's like something you'd buy. Thank you. Geez, you're good at flattery. This carrot slaw is perfectly balanced with the vinegar. The orange scent really freshens up your mouth. That's because Christmas meals tend to be rich, so I made it a bit more acidic. Something's off. Every time someone tries to compliment my Christmas cooking, mother-in-law interrupts. Something is not right, she declares, revealing the source of this awkwardness. Sophia, father-in-law's sister, comments, Emily, mother-in-law, is such a great cook, isn't she? Confused, I let out a dumbfounded sound. Unperturbed, Sophia continues her story. Did Olivia make this entire Christmas feast? That's amazing. Huh? I haven't cooked a full-course Christmas meal in ages. I was going to leave it to my daughter-in-law, but she's absolutely terrible in the kitchen and never comes by, even when I offer to teach her. Mother-in-law talks about struggles she never even faced, leaving me puzzled. Oh, Emily, you should really take after Olivia while she's still well. Jake might miss the taste of home sometimes, you know. The way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Daniel, a relative hanging around, laughs as if mocking me. You know, Olivia, that pork belly stew you made last time was delicious. It's amazing you can cook both Western and Japanese dishes. It's not that big of a deal, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. Mother-in-law smiles and feigns humility. That pork belly stew was clearly my creation. As I stand there astonished, she mouths, "Go along with it." Apparently, she's been claiming all my dishes, including the Christmas feast, as her own and sharing them with the family. Now she wants me to be complicit in her lie. No way, especially after she's been criticizing my cooking all this time. Though I want to speak out. Overwhelmed by the crowd, I find myself speechless until my young son becomes my unexpected savior. Mom, this omelet is really tasty. It looks different than usual, but your omelets are always good," echoes his high-pitched voice, silencing the noisy adults. Sophia, perhaps out of kindness, attempts to cover for my son, saying, "Oh, Mike, this is actually what your grandmother made." Astonished, my son responds, "Huh? But it's tasty, so it's got to be Mom's omelette." Grandma's omelette is super sweet and gritty. It doesn't taste good, he passionately insists, gesticulating wildly, leaving the adults exchanging puzzled glances. Panic ensues, and the mother-in-law tries to intervene, saying, "Emily, don't teach the child to lie." "Excuse me? Who's the one lying here? Mom, am I a liar?" Mike looks up at me, his face full of insecurity. That's when I feel my blood boil. Frustrated, I declare, Mike is not a liar. "The one lying here is you, Grandma." "Huh. She must not have expected me to stand up to her." My mother-in-law looks shocked as I stand up, pointing dramatically at the table. "I made this entire Christmas feast, including the corn soup. Everything from start to finish." Naturally, the room erupts in response. My flustered mother-in-law begins to panic and yells, "Wait, wait, wait. Emily, you've been lying this whole time. Have you lost your mind?" "I'm not lying," I assert. Sophia, pulled into this, looks up at me surprised. "Yes, it was delicious. I made that too." You're terrible, stealing credit for Jake's mom's cooking and trying to set her up." "You're the worst daughter-in-law," I accuse. Attempting to defend herself, my mother-in-law hesitates, then shouts, "It's a secret family recipe. I can't tell you in public." The relatives, initially disgusted by our petty fight, start to see who was in the right. But my husband Jake appears near the door, restraining me with a stern voice and face. "Emily, that's enough." My mother-in-law clings to Jake, looking like a tragic heroine. Jake, addressing his mother, says, "Mom, you're the awful one here. This entire Christmas feast Emily made all day while taking care of the kids. Trying to take credit for it is pretty low." Caught in the middle again, Sophia looks at the creamy stew, recalling how sweet it was. "Yeah, it was insanely sweet, wasn't it, Mom?" Seizing the opportunity, Jake reveals, if it's sweet, it's tasty. She's always been cautious about salt and oil, but uses sugar with no limits. So all her dishes taste like a block of sugar. The truth unfolds, exposing mother-in-law's lies. Disillusioned, the family realizes that all the recent dishes were likely made by me, not her. Mother-in-law, exposed for all her lies, panics and tries to appeal to Jake's emotions. "Why are you siding with your daughter-in-law? I'm your mom," she pleads. The revelation leaves everyone in the family disillusioned with the mother-in-law. "I never wanted to say this, Mom. I thought your actions were driven by loneliness since Dad isn't here, so I've been having Emily put up with you. But what you're doing is nothing short of harassment towards her. There's no reason to protect you anymore. Don't see Emily or the kids ever again." Jake, firm in dismissing his begging mother, starts to clean up the Christmas feast. Then he apologizes to the relatives, saying, "I'm sorry for the disturbance this Christmas. Emily, Mike, let's go." As Jake takes Mike's hand and stands up, Mike glances at his grandmother and asks, "Grandma, where's your I'm sorry?" "When you lie, you say I'm sorry, then you get forgiven, right? Isn't that right, Mom?" I get it. You have to be forgiving when it comes to raising kids, but a simple sorry isn't going to cut it." Luckily, I didn't have to worry for even a second. Mother-in-law clenched her lips so tightly they looked like they'd bleed, clearly having no intention of apologizing. Seeing her, Jake sighed as if he had enough. "Grandma can't even say I'm sorry, and she's supposed to be an adult. How sad. Let's go home and have Mom's delicious Christmas feast." Okay. We left behind a growling mother-in-law and confused relatives, carrying our sleeping daughter and the Christmas feast. As we left Mike's house, we went straight to my parents' place and served the Christmas feast. Everyone was delighted and ate with joy. This is what I had been striving for, so my heart was full. Jake, of course, apologized profusely, and promised never to let us meet his mother-in-law again. Apparently, the atmosphere at my house remained awkward. His relatives dispersed, leaving only a soulless mother-in-law and some bland food. The next day, mother-in-law's sister and her husband, as well as Jake's sister, visited as promised. Seeing the bland food, they chuckled and said figures. Apparently, mother-in-law's lack of cooking skills was a well-known fact among her relatives. So, you brag about hosting a Christmas feast. I wondered what magic trick you'd pull, probably just jealous of Emily, who's good at cooking and praised by Jake and Mike. Sorry for the inconvenience, they said after hearing the details from Jake. My sister-in-law thanked me for my efforts, and Sophia called to apologize. I'm sorry for jumping to conclusions. It turns out Sophia also enjoys cooking, and we bonded over a recipe for braised pork belly. The misunderstanding with Jake was cleared up, and I found new friends who share my cooking hobby. I felt refreshed, enjoying a carefree Christmas. Of course, mother-in-law wasn't going to back down that easily, but I was well prepared. As I was making cornbread, my phone rang. It was mother-in-law. Excuse me, where are you? It's dinner time. Do your duty as a wife. Are you making the same mistake and coming over again? She's furious on the other end of the line. How dare you? I came here because you didn't apologize. Come home and clear the misunderstanding with our relatives. Then I'll forgive you for embarrassing me. No thanks. What? You'll be the one left out by the family. That won't be a problem. What to begin with, the one who put on airs and got shunned by the relatives was mother-in-law. I've even made plans to cook with Sophia next time. What? Mother-in-law probably never imagined that I become close to father-in-law's side of the family. So, what now? Still got any moves left? I add another blow to the stunned mother-in-law. Also, I'm not returning to that house. What? Yes, the kids and I have been staying at my parents' house since Christmas. We're planning to find a new place to live now that the holidays are over. Initially, living near Mike's family was mother-in-law's strong insistence, but Jake's workplace is actually closer to my parents' house. Didn't Jake tell you to stay away from daughter-in-law? But since mother-in-law can't listen better than a child, we've decided to physically distance ourselves. Right now, Jake is the only one living there, and he'll leave once he's ready. What? Where? Where are you? Who knows? You think you can get away with not cherishing Jake's mom? Yes, because Jake and sister-in-law have forgiven me. It's okay. Well, wait. What? Thank you for everything so far, mother-in-law. I'm so happy I'll never have to see you again. Goodbye. Wait a minute. With a bit of a laugh, I hang up on mother-in-law, who's screaming like a villain in a superhero show. Then I block her number to make sure I never have to hear her voice again. 2 years later. Mom, what's for dinner today? Hamburgers. Yay! I love Mom's burgers the most in the world. Sarah loves them too. Dad loves them the most in the universe. Dad, that's not fair. My family happily waits for my cooking in the living room, playing around as I fry the burgers in the kitchen. My heart warms up again today, watching them eagerly await my cooking, smiles on their faces. Growing up, it was always clear to me that I stood apart from the rest of my family. My name is Jenny, and I hail from a lineage of restaurant owners. My father, Joe, is a commanding figure, overseeing our family restaurant with a strict hand. My mother, Linda, is his impeccable partner, constantly engrossed in managing the staff. Then there's my older brother, Mike, the golden boy groomed to inherit the family business. I recall a night at the dinner table, the air saturated with the savory scent of Dad's renowned roast. Mom enthusiastically shared details about a new recipe they were experimenting with. Jenny, you'll love this one. It has that fancy herb you adore. What's it called again? She asked, her eyes sparkling. Thyme, I mumbled, idly picking at my food. Mike, mouthful, laughed dismissively from across the table. Who cares about some dumb herb? Wait till you see the new grill Dad's getting for the restaurant. That's the real deal. Dad nodded, his gaze fixed on me. Speaking of the restaurant, Jenny, when are you going to start taking an interest? You're not getting any younger. Attempting to make myself inconspicuous in my chair, I responded, when I'm dad. I like being outside with the plants and stuff. Mom sighed, exchanging a glance with Dad. Plants. What are you going to do with plants? You need a real job, Jenny, something to fall back on. A knot tightened in my stomach. It was the same conversation every time, but Grandma Rose understood. She lived in a small house surrounded by a breathtaking garden on the outskirts of town. Grandma Rose was different from my parents, gentle and patient. One day, as I found her in the garden, hands immersed in the soil, she smiled brightly. Jenny, dear, come help me plant these tulips. Sitting beside her, feeling the cool dirt on my hands, I confided, Grandma, why don't Mom and Dad understand? I love being here with the plants. Grandma Rose wiped her brow, looking at me with wise eyes. Your parents just want what's best for you, Jenny, but they don't see the world the same way we do. There's magic in these plants in the earth. It's okay to be different. I clung to Grandma Rose's words, even as the pressure from my family intensified. High school graduation marked a crossroads. The house buzzed with excitement over Mike's plans to join Dad at the restaurant. Amidst it all, I felt like a spectator in my own life. One evening, as we gathered in the living room, Dad spoke passionately about expanding the restaurant, eyes gleaming with ambition. Mom turned to me, her voice sharp. And what about you, Jenny? Ready to step up, handle the front desk, learn the ropes. Taking a deep breath, I mustered the courage to speak my truth. Actually, I'm not going to work at the restaurant. I'm going to study landscape design. The room fell silent. Dad's face turned red, and he barked. Landscape what now? That's no career for you. You're a part of this family, and the restaurant is our legacy. Mike sneered. What are you going to do? Plant flowers for a living? My cheeks burned, but I held my ground. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm good at it, and I love it. Mom's expression wavered between confusion and concern. Jenny, be sensible. You can't make a living off playing in the dirt. I rose to my feet, a surge of defiance coursing through me. It's not just playing in the dirt, Mom. It's creating something beautiful, something real. I'm not asking for your approval, but I am telling you, this is my decision. Dad slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming. If you choose this foolishness, you're on your own. Don't expect any help from us. A knot tightened in my stomach, but my voice remained steady. Fine, I'll do it on my own. Grandma Rose, who had been quietly knitting in the corner, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but carried weight. Joe, let the girl follow her heart. She's got a gift, and it would be a sin to waste it. Her eyes fixed on Dad. Dad let out a frustrated grunt, turning away. Fine, do what you want, but don't come crying to us when it all falls apart. I turned to leave the room, my heart pounding. Mike called out after me, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Good luck, gardener. Let's see how far those flowers get you. Stepping into college life felt like diving into deep water, thrilling yet daunting. I, Jenny, was far from the familiar paths of my family's expectations, ready to carve my own way in the world of landscape design. I still remember the buzz of the first day in class, the room swirling with the energy of eager students. I found a spot in the back, trying to shrink into the shadows. That's when Zoe, a girl with fire engine red hair and eyes full of mischief, dropped into the seat next to me. Hey there, nudie. I'm Zoe, a first-timer in landscape design. I gave a shy nod. Yeah, I'm Jenny. It's all a bit overwhelming. Zoe's laugh was loud and genuine. You'll fit right in. Wait till you get your hands into the real dirt. It's epic. What dragged you into this world? I hesitated, the disapproval of my family still fresh. I've always loved plants, the outdoors. It's where I feel right, you know. Her grin widened. Perfect place for you then. Classes were a whirlwind of learning and creating. I absorbed things like a sponge, from the science of soils to the art of design. I was finally speaking a language I loved. After one particularly intense session, Mr. Davidson, our professor, A man as tall and sturdy as an oak called me over. "Jenny, your designs, there's something else. You've got a real knack for this." His voice was serious but encouraging. I was stunned. "Really? Thank you, Mr. Davidson. I'm just trying to do my best." He leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "There's potential in you. Don't let it go to waste. Push harder." His words became my mantra. I started to live in the studio, my designs becoming more ambitious, more expressive. It was exhausting but exhilarating. But even in those moments of joy, a part of me yearned for my family. Despite everything, one quiet evening, I gathered the courage to call home. The phone rang, each tone heavy with anticipation. Finally, Mom's voice came through, sharp like a knife's edge. "What? What do you want, Jenny?" Her tone stung, but I pushed on. "I just wanted to check in, see how everyone is." She snorted, her voice dripping with scorn. "Oh, now you care, after running off to play in the dirt, abandoning your own family." I gritted my teeth, struggling to maintain a steady voice. "I didn't abandon anyone, Mom. I just chose a different path." Her laugh was bitter. "A dead-end path, you mean? Don't expect us to be here waiting when it all crumbles around you." The call ended, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. However, it also ignited a fire within me. I dove back into my work with renewed determination, intent on proving not only to my family but to myself that I was on the right path. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, and mine came in the form of a phone call during my final year of college. It was Aunt Clara, my mom's sister, her voice shaky and strained. "Jenny, it's about your Grandma Rose. She passed away last night." Aunt Clara's voice cracked with emotion, and I felt the ground slip away beneath me. Grandma Rose had been my rock, the one person who believed in my dreams. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. The funeral was a somber affair, my family stiff and formal. Dad, Mom, and Mike looked like strangers to me. After the service, I'd overheard Mom talking to Aunt Clara. "I still can't believe she left that house to Jenny. What's she going to do with it? She can barely take care of herself." Mom's voice dripped with disapproval. I felt a surge of anger but bit my tongue, avoiding a confrontation. The will reading was a few days later. Grandma Rose had left me her house, the beautiful garden haven where I had spent countless hours. My family was shocked, their whispers sharp as thorns. "Why would she leave it to Jenny? She's never around anyway," Mike muttered under his breath. Dad's face was like thunder. "This is ridiculous. That house could have been sold. Put money into the restaurant." I stood up, my voice steady but firm. "Grandma knew I loved that house, that garden. It was where we spent so much time together. I'm going to keep it, just as she wanted." Mom's response was cold and harsh. "So you're just going to live there alone, playing in the dirt? What a waste." Their words stung, but I had made up my mind. I moved into Grandma's house, immersing myself in the garden she had loved so dearly. I started renovating the place, pouring my heart into every plant, every flower bed. As the months passed, I transformed Grandma's garden into something truly special. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could be myself away from the judgment and expectations of my family. The day the invitation to Mike's wedding arrived at my doorstep was a day of mixed feelings. It was a fancy piece of paper with golden letters against a white background, representing a part of my life I had left behind. Staring at it, a storm of emotions churned inside me. I decided to go, but on my terms. I dressed in a way that felt true to me, elegant but simple, a far cry from the dirt-stained clothes they remembered. Entering the restaurant, the sights and sounds of my past life engulfed me. I spotted my family across the room, Mom, Dad, and Mike, all decked out, looking like a picture-perfect family. Bracing myself, I walked over. "Jenny, I didn't think you'd accept the invitation." Mom's voice was sharp, cutting through the noise. "I came to see Mike get married." "It's a family event, isn't it?" I replied, trying to keep my voice level. Mike glanced at me, his smirk familiar and unwelcome. "What's the matter? Ran out of bushes to trim? Decided to play dress up for a change." I felt a familiar sting, but I brushed it off. I'm just here to wish well, Mike. It was then that his bride, a tall woman with a haughty look, chimed in. Oh, this is the infamous gardener sister. Did you manage to scrub the dirt from under your nails, dear, or is it your natural look? Her words, sharp and mocking, hung in the air. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let her see how deep they cut. I clean up just fine, thanks for asking. Congratulations to you both. Dad's eyes were cold, his voice colder. Your being here doesn't erase the past, Ginny. You chose your path. Their words were like thorns, but I had grown a thick skin. I'm not here to rehash old arguments, just wanted to wish Mike a happy married life. I was quickly ushered to a small table in the corner, away from the family. Sitting there, I could feel the curious stares and hushed whispers. That's the gardener, they whispered, the black sheep of the family. But as I sat there, a sense of pride welled up in me. Yes, I was the gardener, the one who had dared to follow her own path. I was no longer the shy, unsure girl they remembered, but a woman who had found her strength, who had bloomed in spite of them. My discomfort only grew as the evening stretched on. Sipping my drink, I tried to make myself invisible. But that plan fell apart when I caught the eye of some guys I knew from childhood. Mike's friends, the same ones who used to join him in mocking me. Look who's here, the family's little dirt digger, one of them, Jake, sneered as they approached, a smirk plastered on his face. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Actually, it's a landscape designer, but I wouldn't expect you to understand the difference. Their laughter was harsh, grating. Oh, listen to her. Thinks she's all high and mighty now, Chris added with a scoff. I bit back a sharp retort, my hands clenching under the table. I worked hard for my success. My job is more than just playing in the dirt. Their amusement was cut short when an elderly man at the next table interjected. He had been listening, his expression growing increasingly disapproving. I've seen this young lady's work, the new park downtown. That's hers. It's outstanding, shows what you know. The group was visibly taken aback, their smugness faltering. Muttering under their breath, they slunk away, their egos bruised. Emboldened, I decided to venture out from my safe corner, mingling through the crowd, dodging glances and whispers. That's when I overheard Mike speaking to a group of his friends. She's always been the odd one, more into her plants than real work, Mike said, his voice laced with a mix of amusement and disdain. His friend laughed loudly. Every family's got its black sheep, huh? Their words were like a slap, raw and stinging. I walked away, my heart pounding, reminding myself their opinions didn't define me. As I weaved through the crowd, I'd bumped into my cousin Lucy, a quiet presence in our loud family. Hey, Jenny, I've seen some of your designs. They're really something, she said, her voice sincere. I managed a small smile. Thanks, Lucy. It means a lot, especially today. Lucy looked at me, her eyes understanding. I never agreed with how they treated you. You're doing amazing things. I'm glad you stuck to your path. Her words were a small comfort amidst the thorns of the evening. We chatted briefly, a momentary respite from the tension. As Lucy drifted away, I returned to my corner, feeling the weight of the evening. The loud music, clinking glasses, and bursts of laughter around me felt like they were happening in a different world. I sat there, sipping my drink, longing for the celebration to end. The wedding night was winding down, its fancy aura overshadowed by my own tangled feelings. Just when I thought the night couldn't get any more surreal, the mayor, a distant relative of Mike's bride, took the stage for his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a delight to be here, he began, his voice booming across the room. But tonight, I want to highlight a special guest among us, a true star in the world of landscape design, Ginny. Hearing my name, I nearly choked on my drink. I stood up hesitantly, feeling like a deer caught in headlights. The mayor beamed at me. Jenny here is the brilliant mind behind the transformation of our city park. She's a celebrated landscape designer who's won multiple awards for her incredible work. Let's give her the recognition she deserves. The room erupted into applause, a sound that felt foreign to me. I glanced at my family's table and saw their faces, a mix of shock and embarrassment. Mike's bride leaned towards him, her voice dripping with disbelief. Is he talking about your sister, the gardener? Mike mumbled something, looking like he wished the floor would swallow him up. The mayor's praise continued. Jenny's work has revitalized our city. She's a true talent. Amidst the clapping, I felt a surge of confidence. The mayor's words were like a light, dispelling the shadows of doubt and scorn from my family. Seizing the moment, I decided to speak up. Thank you, Mayor, for your kind words. It's an honor to contribute to our city's beauty. I paused, my gaze sweeping over the crowd, settling on my family. It's funny, isn't it? How life turns out. Mike, you and your bride are perfect for each other. Your shared talent for rudeness to others is quite remarkable. The room went silent, the air thick with tension. My parents, my brother, and his fiancée blushed deep red, their shame as visible as if I'd slapped them. Mom's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. Jenny, what are you saying? This is your brother's wedding. I met her gaze unflinching. Just speaking the truth, Mom, something our family seems to struggle with. Mike stood up, his face red with anger. You can't come here and talk to us like that. I held my ground, my voice steady. I've earned my right to speak, Mike. Maybe it's time you all listened. The confrontation ended with Mike sitting down defeated, and the room slowly buzzing back to life. The mayor gave me a nod of respect before moving on. As I sat back down, the weight of the night lifted slightly. I had spoken my piece, stood up for myself in a way I never had before. I was no longer just the gardener or the outcast. I was Jenny, a recognized landscape designer, someone who had grown past her family's narrow expectations. After Mike's wedding, word got out about my success as a landscape designer. People were buzzing about the awards I'd won and the projects I'd aced. It felt like stepping into the sunlight after years in the shadows. And then my family came calling. One afternoon, while I was busy sketching out a new garden design, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice had a sweetness to it that felt out of place. Jenny, darling, we've been hearing so much about your work. Your father and I are so proud of you. I raised an eyebrow. Really? That's a change of tune. There was a pause on the line. Well, we were thinking maybe you could come over. We'd love to see you, catch up on things. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Catch up or catch onto my bank account? I shot back, Mom, that's not fair. We're family. The word family hit a nerve. Family like when you all but disown me for following my dreams. It seems like family matters when there's money in the picture. Before she could respond, I ended the call. I wasn't about to let them back into my life just because they smelled success. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. Mike was standing there, hands in his pockets, looking everywhere but at me. Hey, Jenny, can we talk? He mumbled. I crossed my arms. This should be good. What do you want, Mike? He shifted uncomfortably. Look, I know we haven't been great, but you're doing well. I was wondering if you could, help me out a bit. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Help you out after years of calling me the gardener and laughing at my ambitions? Mike's face reddened. I didn't mean it like that. It's just that things are tough. I cut him off. Save it, Mike. I'm not your ATM. You and the family made it clear how you felt about me. You can't just waltz back into my life when it's convenient. He opened his mouth to argue, but I stopped him. No, Mike. You made your bed. Now lie in it. After he left, I sat in my garden surrounded by the beauty I had created. My phone rang a few more times over the next week, more attempts at reconciliation from my family, but I didn't answer. I was done with their fair weather affection. I had built a life for myself, one that didn't need their validation or their greed. I was thriving in my own right, and that was all that mattered. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. As I looked around at the plants and flowers that were a testament to my hard work and passion, I realized I had everything I needed right here. I was happy, successful, and free from the toxic ties that had once bound me. This wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a whole new book, my book. And I was going to make sure it was a bestseller written on my own terms, in my own style. The new growth in my life was just starting, and I was ready for whatever came next.